Story starts with a rugged mountain peak stood silent, shrouded in a sea of thick mist. But tranquility rarely lasts. A lone warrior, his face scarred and bloodied, glared fiercely into the distance. Gripping a massive axe, the man stared up as ominous figures levitated high above the trees. His golden eyes burned with an undeniable rage. Before he could blink, 5 elite martial artists launched a deadly barrage of mystical artifacts down upon him. At their helm stood an elder, calmly holding a glowing blue gemstone. With a flick of his wrist, a radiant halo of swords materialized around the old man. Down below, the rain of glowing projectiles downpour on the axe-wielding warrior. His eyes narrowed to slits before he stomped the ground with explosive force. Suddenly, a tremendous blast of energy erupted from him, tearing through the surrounding. The sheer power sent him flying towards the raining projectiles. The mountainsides themselves crumbled under the devastating shockwave. As the dust settled, a towering shadow loomed within the rubble. Thick drops of blood pattered heavily against the dry dirt. The warrior slumped forward, coughing up a sickening amount of blood. Knowing when he was outmatched, he scrambled desperately down the rocky slope to escape. Suddenly, his eye widened in terror. The floating figures had already surrounded the forest below. He skidded to a halt, boxed in by an army of disciplined swordsmen. A voice boomed through the clearing, shouting his name, Yom Siak. A stern-faced master pointed an accusing finger at him. He shouted, "You are guilty of learning evil demonic arts and deceiving the world." Another swordsman joined in, barking, "You have committed a grave crime by driving the martial world into bloodshed." Yom Siak simply smirked, letting out a dark chuckle. His chuckle escalated into a full-blown, maniacal laughter that echoed off the mountains. He sneered at his captors. He mocked deceiving the world, driving the martial world into bloodshed. Everyone got scared because of his face. With a vicious roar, he swung his giant dual axes with a heavy swoosh. Launching himself high into the air, he cast a terrifying shadow over the swordsmen. He roared, "Go to hell," bringing his weapons crashing down. A colossal pillar of energy erupted from the impact point, sending men flying like ragdolls with a thunderous explosion. One of the survivors screamed, "You evil bastard, stand your ground." But ground could not be held. Blood pooled thickly around a severed limb. A swordsman lay lifeless, impaled on the shattered earth. Yom Siak moved like a hurricane, effortlessly slaughtering everyone in his path. He slowly turned his hulking frame, dripping with fresh blood. The remaining men trembled in absolute terror. He glared at a newcomer, growling, "You." Suddenly, a fast-moving figure caught him completely off guard. A dignified man with a long beard and flowing robes landed gracefully on the battlefield with a soft thud. A cold sweat broke out on Yom Siak's forehead. He muttered, "Sword God Han-ho." Han-ho took a calm, unbothered step forward. Han-ho spoke with chilling calmness. "While it is easy to condemn one who has gone astray to death, it is hard to get them to repent. We will cut off his tendons and destroy his energy core to cleanse him." Yom Siak tightened his grip, but 2 figures silently appeared behind him. The 2 martial artists lunged forward, yelling, "Yes, sir." Yom Siak roared, "You dare," swinging his giant axe with all his might. A flaming crescent of energy tore through the ground, but the 2 men deftly evaded it. He spun his axes into a blinding tornado of steel with a sharp hiss. A heavy blow landed just inches from Han-ho, sending up a massive cloud of dust. The sword god simply stroked his beard, entirely unimpressed. In an instant, the 2 disciples grabbed Yom Siak's arms, forcing him to his knees. Yom Siak struggled furiously, yelling, "Don't be absurd. I've never harmed the farmers. Aren't you guys the ones who picked a fight with me just because I learned demonic arts?" Han-ho pointed a stern finger at him. He replied, "No matter what excuses you come up with, it doesn't change the fact that you've killed hundreds of martial artists." Yom Siak's eyes glowed with an unhinged fury at the word crime. He violently ripped his arms free, bellowing, "Was I supposed to let them kill me, you filthy vermin? I'll kill you all." His explosive aura blasted one of his captors away. He threw the men off completely, rising like a demonic beast. Covered in a fiery aura, he charged straight at the sword god. His glowing eye promised nothing but absolute carnage. Han-ho unleashed a terrifying wave of force, but he stood his ground calmly. With effortless grace, Han-ho summoned 5 massive, glowing swords of different colors above his head. Han-ho commanded, "Go forth," thrusting his hand out. The radiant swords shot forward with blinding speed. Yom Siak's eye widened in sheer panic. The blades struck him, tearing through his formidable aura. He screamed in agony. Ignoring the pain, he leaped high into the air, yelling Han-ho's name. Han-ho merely pointed 2 fingers at the madman and whispered, "Fall." A violent vortex of energy immediately swallowed Yom Siak whole. In the blinding flash of light, blood sprayed violently into the air. 5 brilliant energy spikes pierced cleanly through Yom Siak's back. He coughed up a mouthful of blood, his strength finally failing. He wheezed, "Bastards, I will kill all of you." He hit the ground heavily behind Han-ho, completely incapacitated. A bald monk approached Han Ho, looking worried. He confessed, "I don't know if that was a good decision. It might have been better to kill him and eliminate the source of trouble." Han Ho replied softly, "As long as I am alive, he will never roam the world. Please trust in me and the Manhwa sect." Through his fading vision, Yom Siak saw the blurry figures of his conquerors. He thought to himself, "Sword God Han Ho, I won't forget this." And so the slaughterer demon monarch was defeated. After fighting the combined forces of the martial world for 7 days and nights, he was finally forgotten. Deep within the serene and towering peaks of Mount Hua, a dark hidden cave lay in silence. A cold drop of water splashed against a filthy face. In the pitch blackness, a single eye fluttered open. His blurry vision slowly focused on the jagged ceiling of a stone cavern. The eye shot wide open with sudden realization. Yom Siak lay sprawled out in the dirt, illuminated by a single shaft of light. He gritted his teeth. He realized, "I can't gather any strength at all. My energy core is destroyed too." He weakly twitched his fingers, noting that the tendons of all his limbs had been severed as well. He turned his head toward the heavy iron bars blocking his path, wondering where he was. He was utterly trapped inside a crude, inescapable stone cell. A pathetic groan escaped his lips. He lamented becoming worse than a beast by being kept in a small cave. A soft footstep approached the bars. A calm voice asked if he was awake. Yom Siak strained to lift his head, glaring through his matted hair. Standing outside the cell was an old man with long, flowing white hair and a peaceful demeanor. Yom Siak growled like a cornered animal, demanding to know where he was and who the man was. The old man spoke softly, stating that this was Mount Hua. Yom Siak's eye bulged in utter disbelief at the name, Mount Hua. The old man introduced himself as Woon Geom. Yom Siak laughed mockingly. He sneered, "The solitary crane, Woon Geom? I guess Mount Hua sect's leader is pretty free, huh?" Woon Geom smiled calmly, explaining that he was no longer the sect leader and would be monitoring him. Yom Siak bared his fangs, asking if they were still that afraid of him even after destroying his energy core. Woon Geom sat down gracefully on the stone floor. He agreed, noting that the slaughterer demon monarch was indeed terrifying, and suggested they try to get along. The old man settled into a quiet meditation just beyond the iron bars. Yom Siak's face contorted in absolute rage at the nonsense. Old man looked at him and said, "Didn't I tell you I am no longer the sect leader? I will be hoping that you will quickly repent of your sins while I recite to you the wise saying that were left behind by Mount Hua sect's ancestors." He slammed his ruined body against the floor, screaming that he would kill every single one of them. His guttural roar echoed endlessly through the damp cavern. Woon Geom didn't even flinch. He simply reached into his robes with a soft rustle. Yom Siak shrieked, demanding to be let out. Woon Geom produced a small brush and sat in total, undisturbed silence. Eventually, Yom Siak could only lay there, panting heavily from exhaustion. Woon Geom casually read aloud from a philosophical scripture about life, death, and emptiness. 10 long years passed. The sun continued to set over the peaceful mountains, accompanied by the gentle chirping of birds. Down in the dark, forgotten cave, Yom Siak sat cross-legged. Despite his severed tendons, his body was impossibly muscular, though his face looked worn. Woon Geom lazily flipped the page of his book. The old man pondered if Yom Siak had finally adapted, noting the silence over the past years. Suddenly, Woon Geom's eyes widened in surprise. He stuttered in his thoughts, wondering how what he was seeing could be possible. A heavy bead of sweat dripped from Yom Siak's trembling fingers onto the damp stone. Against all medical logic, the demon monarch was doing push-ups. His face twisted in agony with every agonizing lift as he groaned in pain. Woon Geom stood by the bars, watching in absolute silence. Sweat poured down Yom Siak's focused, determined face. He pushed his ruined body off the ground with a mighty roar of exertion. The old man watched the prisoner collapse, exhausted but unrelenting. Woon Geom slowly turned another page. He thought to himself that while the prisoner could train his muscles, recovering a destroyed energy core was impossible. The old man sighed deeply, stroking his long beard. He returned to his book, hoping the demon would eventually stop being so stubborn. Time flowed like falling pages, drifting away into the abyss. Another 20 years later, a young man stood outside the cell, introducing himself as Jang Hyun, a first-class disciple. Inside the cell sat Yom Siak, his hair and beard now completely white, looking like an ancient stone statue. Jang Hyun scoffed, remarking on how persistent the prisoner was after all these years. The young disciple drew his sword with a sharp scrape, warning the old man not to try anything stupid. He glared through the bars, demanding to be heard. The old demon monarch opened one eye, analyzing the boy's arrogant demeanor. A wicked smile crept across his aged face as he wondered if Mount Hua was still scared of him. Jang Hyun roughly shoved a miserable bowl of rice through the bars, telling him to stay quiet. He dropped the bowl entirely, spilling the meager meal onto the dirt with a thud, complaining about his lack of training time. Ignoring his prisoner, Jang Hyun began fiercely practicing his sword forms right outside the cell. Yom Siak sat quietly in the dark, listening to the swish of the blade and identifying the martial arts. Jang Hyun caught him watching and snapped, asking if the old man was reminiscing about his defeat. The disciple leaped arrogantly past the bars. Yom Siak simply scoffed in amusement. Outside, the seasons changed. The wind howled through a barren tree. Winter blanketed the mountains in a thick layer of snow. The harsh weather battered the solitary plum blossom tree. Petals fell softly into the abyss, and so a long time passed by. The grand waterfall of Mount Hua continued to flow, indifferent to the passing decades. The dark cave remained, silent as a tomb. Suddenly, Yom Siak gasped, his eyes flying open in the darkness. He leaned forward, his voice a raspy whisper as he asked what you just said. A pair of small, soft shoes stepped lightly up to the iron bars. A young, cheerful boy with bright eyes smiled warmly at the terrifying monster, asking, "Grandpa, who are you?" The ancient demon monarch pointed a trembling finger at his own chest. He stuttered, "You are asking." He finished in pure disbelief, "Who I am." The young boy blinked his innocent eyes and asked, "Yes, who are you?" A dark, fiery demon silhouette flared in the old man's mind. He began, "I am." Memories of blood and battle raged within him. He declared in his thoughts, "I am Yom Siak. Even the strongest man in the Murim, the sword god Han-ho, could not deal with me alone." The old man's eye widened fiercely as the chaotic memories surfaced. He opened his mouth to boast to the boy, starting once more, "I am." A terrifying image of his past self loomed behind him like a fiery ghost. He thought proudly, "I have brought down Mount Hua sect and burned the Murim with my wrath and hatred. I am the slaughterer demon monarch, Yom Siak." The young boy asked, "Sir, you must have been really strong, right?" But then reality crashed down on old man, and he froze abruptly, his grand speech dying in his throat. He let out a heavy sigh and facepalmed. He asked the boy wearily, "You do not even know why you are here, right?" The boy nodded cheerfully and explained, "Yes, I was simply told to take care of you. They did not tell me about who you were or anything else about you." The boy stood there, exuding a soft, naive innocence that practically sparkled. The old man stared in disbelief, thinking, he is just a kid who still is not old enough to have a beard. Misinterpreting the intense stare, the boy touched his face nervously and asked, "Is there something on my face?" The old man's eye narrowed in deep suspicion as he thought, "Did the Mount Hua sect forget about me?" The boy tilted his head, completely oblivious, and asked, "Sir." A wave of absolute devastation washed over the old man's wrinkled face. He thought, "Did they really forget all about me?" He stared down at his trembling, scarred hands. He wondered, what have I been holding on to and living on for while being imprisoned? The crushing weight of decades wasted hit him. He muttered in despair, "What did I do that for?" Utterly defeated, the old man slumped against the cold stone wall of his cell. He spoke to the empty air, his voice hollow. "The world has forgotten about me. The world has forgotten about the slaughterer demon monarch, Yom Siak." He grabbed his messy hair and let out a dry, bitter laugh. "Why have I tried to prolong my life this far?" The faces of his old rivals flashed before his eyes. He questioned himself. What did I train for? For what did I obsess in trying to recover my martial arts? Closing his tired eyes, he wondered pitifully, am I truly living? The grim reality set in. He realized, Han-ho is probably dead, and Woon Jiam is probably dead too. I no longer know anyone in the world. Who am I supposed to hate and seek revenge upon? He curled his legs up, looking frail and broken. Internal energy, martial arts, power, do I need those anymore? Outside the dark cave, the sun began to set over the serene mountains, accompanied by the gentle chirping of birds. Inside, the old man lay flat on the cold prison floor, entirely given up on life. He covered his face with his hand and burst into a sudden, hollow laughter. Ha, 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 ha. A strange sense of peace washed over him. He realized, since I do not have enemies, there is no anger. Since there is no anger, there is no need to make enemies. Hatred and anger are futile. Now I no longer have anything to do, achieve, or look forward to. A single drop of water fell from the cave ceiling with a soft splash, echoing in the silence. A faint, genuine smile appeared on the old man's lips. He whispered, "Yeah, I have also mellowed down along with time." A memory of a wise sage teaching about the yin and yang surfaced in his mind. The sage had said, "Why do you think you are in this state? That is because you are not able to achieve harmony with the world and its people. Disharmony prevents you from achieving harmony in the world. Being harmonious is not about thinking of others first. It is about understanding yourself. You need to reconcile with yourself and forgive yourself." The old man's eyes snapped open, a spark igniting within. He thought harmony. He gripped his stomach as a strange sensation bloomed inside him. Why am I suddenly remembering that now? Suddenly, an intense, invisible flame erupted from his body with a crackling roar. The fiery energy swirled around him as he glared fiercely. He thought, I have already emptied and let go of myself, but I am suddenly remembering that now. He sat up in a lotus position, engulfed in a roaring aura of crimson power. The mystical flames danced around him with a soft swooshing sound, surging through his meridians. Thick black smoke billowed out as the impurities of his body were forcefully expelled. The old man screamed out as his body underwent an excruciatingly miraculous transformation. With a sizzling hiss, the years began to melt away. To his shock, his white hair rapidly darkened to pitch black. His frail, wrinkled arms burned with mystical energy, the old skin peeling back to reveal smooth flesh. His hands healed completely, regaining the vigor and strength of his youth with a steady sizzle. He slowly closed his new, powerful hand into a fist, the joints cracking sharply. A fierce, sharp-eyed man in the prime of his life had taken the place of the decrepit elder. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a confident smirk returning. He thought, at the very least, I must not forget about myself. Clenching his fist with immense strength, he firmly noted, just because my body has gotten younger, it is a fact that a lot of time has passed. He stared out of his cell and let out a long, heavy sigh. Gripping the iron bars with his robust hands, he muttered softly, the world. Far beyond his prison, a peaceful, mist-covered mountain path wound through lush greenery. On that very path, the young boy was sprinting up the stone steps, panting heavily while clutching a large bundle. His stomach let out a loud rumble. He exclaimed, darn it, Grandpa must be really hungry. He finally reached the dark entrance of the cave and scurried inside with rapid footsteps. He dropped a heavy bundle on the ground with a soft thud. Gasping for air, the boy called out, Grandpa, you are hungry, right? He smiled brightly through the iron bars and said, Phew, I am a little late, aren't I? I am sorry for being slow. Sitting casually on the floor, he pulled out a pristine white steamed bun. Come and eat. Suddenly the boy froze, his jaw dropping in shock. He stammered, Grandpa. He stared silently into the cell, trying to process the impossible sight before him. Gripping the bars tightly, he stuttered in disbelief. Grandpa, are you all right? The terrifying, youthful man glared down at him and barked, I am not dead, little rascal. Astonishingly, the boy's fear vanished in an instant. He beamed a massive smile and repeated cheerfully, come and eat. The imposing man stared down at the fearless child. He asked, what is your name? While the boy marveled internally at how the man's hair had turned black and his age spots had vanished. The boy leaned against the bars, practically glowing with joy. I am Jinmu, Jang Jinmu. Still baffled by the kid's enthusiasm, the man asked, why are you so happy when I only simply asked for your name? Jinmu grinned ear to ear. Well, you asked for my name. The man turned away, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. He muttered, gosh, is that something you like that much? In the quiet dark, the demon monarch reflected. When was the last time I saw someone smile? When was the last time I smiled? He closed his eyes, a strange warmth settling in his chest. This feels nice. Deciding to entertain the kid, the man sat down and asked, how old are you? Jinmu cheerfully replied, 14 years old. The man raised an eyebrow. You are pretty small for a 14-year-old. I thought you would be around 10 or 11 years old. Jinmu rubbed the back of his head with a sheepish giggle. I hear that a lot. The man's expression darkened with sudden anger. He thought, those heartless Taoist bastards, how could they send such a kid to a dangerous place like this all alone? He crossed his arms and grumbled, in the past they brought food and clothes to me, but you came here totally empty-handed. I guess Manhwa sect is no longer as great anymore. Tusk, tusk. Completely unfazed, Jinmu held up a blue book triumphantly. Please continue to eat. I will study the Taoism scriptures. He flipped open the old, worn pages with a crisp rustle. Leaning over the book, the boy read aloud with great difficulty. If there is not any form, energy would not exist. The man took a bite of the bun, chewing loudly and thinking, Humph, how is he a Taoist? He is just a young kid mumbling useless things. Jinmu continued reciting blindly. Energy empties one's heart and waits for objects. Only Taoism allows one's heart to be emptied. Emptying one's heart is the core of it. The man could not take the awful recitation anymore. He barked, brat, what is the meaning of what you just read? Jinmu flinched in surprise. The boy scratched his head awkwardly and admitted, it is known as the Void Secret Records. It is something that is very hard to understand. Old man scoffed, gosh, seriously. The man sighed, looking at the boy pitifully. You ought to study something that you can understand. What is the point if you simply memorize it? Jinmu held the book tightly and stuttered nervously. I am told that even if I do not understand its meaning, if I study hard, then I will understand it eventually. Shaking his head, the man lectured, Brat, you ought to wear shoes that fit your feet. Do you intend to cut off parts of your feet to fit a nice-looking shoe? Jinmu tilted his head, completely lost. To demonstrate, the man dropped into a sudden, wide split on the floor. Haven't you heard of the saying, do not bite off more than you can chew? You should not force your legs to open up more because of certain circumstances. If you open your legs up this wide, how would you expect yourself to walk? Jinmu slapped a hand over his mouth, stifling a snorting laugh at the ridiculous pose. But then a light bulb went off in his head. He gasped, ah. Dropping to his knees before the cell, Jinmu practically begged, "Grandpa, please teach me." The man recoiled in pure shock. What do you want me to do?" Bowing low, Jinmu pleaded, "I am not very smart, so I have always found it hard to keep up with our sect's teachings. Please teach me what you just talked to me about." The demon monarch stared at the boy, utterly bewildered. He thought, what kind of nonsense is he talking about? Jinmu looked up with sparkling, hopeful eyes. "Grandpa, please teach me what you have learned from isolating yourself in order to gain enlightenment in the mountains remotely." The man pointed to himself, flabbergasted. "Enlightenment? Isolating myself in the mountains? Who, me?" Jinmu clenched his fists excitedly. "Grandpa, I know it all. You are a retired elder, right? I know that. You are meditating in this cave so you can attain deity ascension, right?" Without waiting for an answer, Jinmu threw himself forward, slamming his head against the stone floor. "Please teach me." The terrifying demon monarch panicked, waving his hands frantically. "Brat, why are you bashing your head on the floor? Do not do that." Ignoring him, Jinmu continued to repeatedly bash his head against the floor with heavy thuds, shouting, "Please teach me." The man grabbed the bars, yelling desperately, "Do not do that. Stop it right now." Finally defeated by the stubborn child, the man threw his head back and surrendered. All right, I will do it. I will teach you," he shouted, his voice echoing out of the cave and into the clear blue sky. The man sat cross-legged and said, "There's a saying that goes, make use of what's useless." Jinmu looked perplexed as he asked, "How can you make use of something useless, though?" The old man sat in the cell and replied simply, "It's not hard. Are ferocious beasts helpful or harmful to humans?" Jinmu thought for a moment before answering, "They are harmful since they hurt people." The old man painted a picture with his words, explaining that if beasts keep people away, lumberjacks can't cut down trees, allowing the mountain to thrive and become greener. Realization hit Jinmu like a spark, and he gasped loudly, "Oh." The man said, "The mountain needs to be green for all sorts of animals and plants to grow. Now does that mean ferocious beasts that are harmful to humans are useless?" The young boy replied no. A large, rough hand gently patted Jinmu's head. "Good boy," the old man said with a warm smile, making Jinmu chuckle. The irony wasn't lost on the old man as he thought to himself, "The world is such a strange place. To think that a great demon who's the public enemy of Murim would be teaching a kid from the Manhwa sect." Jinmu gripped the iron bars, eyes wide with excitement. "Grandpa," he shouted, "could I become a highly renowned and incredible Taoist of the Manhwa sect when I grow up?" The old man leaned in and asked, "Why are you thinking of something like that?" The boy suddenly slumped down, a gloomy shadow falling over him as his enthusiasm deflated. The old man observed him quietly, noting internally, "It seems he's already familiar with sadness at such a young age." "Jinmu," the old man called out softly. The boy peeked up, looking utterly defeated, and replied, "Yes, Grandpa." The old man looked down at him through the bars and encouraged him. "You're still young. If you endure things, keep patience, and work hard, then you will be able to fulfill your wish." Jinmu hung his head lower, explaining that his exceptionally talented peers had already found masters and temples, while he didn't even have a Taoist name and his seniors didn't know his real name. The old man sat in silence, staring intensely at the boy as a heavy silence filled the space. A wild idea struck him. He thought, should I teach this kid the slaughterer demon art? He immediately clutched his own face, appalled by his own thought. That's crazy. A disciple of the Manhwa sect learning demonic arts. His life would be over the moment they realized that. He slammed his fist into the floor with heavy thuds, frustrated. If he learns from the public enemy of Murim, he will eventually become one himself. He cursed himself internally. Yom Siak, how could you think of passing down demonic arts to such a kind and frail kid? You crazy old man. Do you want Jinmu to experience misfortunes in life just like you did? Old man asked the kid, "Jinmu, do you know why treasures are considered as treasures?" He composed himself and reached out to pat Jinmu's head again, asking if jewels were commonly seen like rocks on the streets. Jinmu shook his head and said, "No." The old man stroked the boy's hair gently. "That's right. Usually precious things aren't commonly seen by others, so the fewer people recognize your talents, the more precious and rare you are." His voice carried the weight of ancient wisdom. A blade needs to wait for a whetstone in order to become sharp, and large hills and high mountains must be piled up from the lower ground as well. Jinmu gasped, his eyes widening. "Grandpa," he cried out. The boy dramatically bowed on the ground, flinging his arms up with a soft sliding sound. "I knew you were someone great. That was such wise advice." The old man sat cross-legged, trying to play it cool despite the blatant flattery. He coughed awkwardly. That's no big deal." Jinmu looked up, literal sparkles forming around him. "I can't believe I was able to get enlightenment so easily. He's someone who must be on top of the world," he thought. The old man chuckled softly. "So don't feel anxious or sad. You just need to continue to aspire and work towards fulfilling that dream of yours." But Jinmu looked troubled, remembering his lessons. But Taoism teaches that dreams are futile, that it's a useless delusion that's like a bubble. The old man shook his head, arms crossed firmly. Dreams represent hope and aspirations. You need a dream so that you can work hard towards fulfilling it and to experience the enjoyment that the long journey of life provides. If dreams are nothing but delusions, then what do people live for? Jinwoo's face lit up with absolute joy, clenching his fists in excitement. I'll bear your advice in mind. He pressed his hands against his chest, committing it to memory. I mustn't forget this. Life is about dreaming and fulfilling the dreams, he thought cheerfully. Time passed, and the sun began to set behind the towering, jagged peaks of the mountain, casting a warm, golden glow over the rugged terrain. The old man sat alone in his dark cell, tapping his finger against the floor. It's been 5 days, he murmured. Suddenly, hurried footsteps echoed as Jinwoo rushed in carrying a large sack. I'm sorry, Grandpa, you must be hungry. The boy looked deeply worried, but the old man calmly replied, no. He continued dismissively, it's not that big of a deal. The old man smirked to himself, realizing the sect had simply forgotten about him because the slaughterer demon monarch was no longer important. Jinwoo set the heavy sack down with a thud. I didn't think I'd be late for 10 days. Are you all right? Did you have any food? The old man sat with his arms crossed, completely unfazed. It's all right, don't worry about it. Outside, dark clouds gathered over the peaks, and a cold wind began to howl ominously through the desolate mountains. Inside the cave, thunder rumbled softly overhead. The old man glanced upward, muttering, Is a storm approaching? Jinwoo unpacked the food, revealing fresh steamed buns, some apples, and a large gourd of water. Grandpa, Jinwoo called out quietly, as the old man lay resting on the cold floor. The old man flinched, snapping his head back in sudden surprise. Jinwoo sat solemnly on his knees, looking uncharacteristically serious and slightly bruised. The Southern Heaven Temple is bringing me away, Jinwoo said softly. He stared at the ground in quiet resignation. I guess someone saw something in me and decided to send me to become a disciple there. The old man sat up swiftly, hiding his surprise with a grunt. That's great. You should go there quickly. What are you doing here? Jinwoo scratched his head, a big embarrassed smile spreading across his face. Well, I asked them to give me a little more time. He grinned broadly, his eyes turning into crescents. Living in the world isn't all that different for Taoists. In a flash of swift movement, the old man swung his arm around. He plopped down into a cross-legged position with a heavy thud, glaring intensely. You must work harder than others, the old man commanded strictly. Jinwoo stood straight and replied, Yes, sir. The old man leaned in close, his expression serious. You must wake up earlier and go to sleep later than others. Jinwoo nodded firmly. Yes, sir. The old man scowled playfully, resting his hands on his knees. Brat, you sure are good at answering, huh? The old man stared intently at the boy, who was beaming with a wide, innocent grin. The old man sighed. Jinwoo, you're someone who starts feeling lonely easily, so you'll probably think a lot about how you're getting a master much later than others. He offered one last piece of profound wisdom. You must always be humble and exercise self-control. If the pond has depth, fishes will gather. And if the forest is wide, birds and animals will come. If you are a great person, then people will naturally follow you. He turned away slightly, a hint of sorrow in his voice. I have a lot of regrets because I didn't know how to exercise self-control in the past. He looked back at Jinwoo sharply. Those who only chase after animals are not able to see the entire mountain. Those who are greedy are not able to see the truth clearly. If you are too lazy or too absorbed in yourself, that means you lack self-control. Do you understand? Jinwoo bowed deeply, pressing his hands together in utmost respect. I'll bear that in mind. The old man closed his eyes, accepting the inevitable parting. This is but another parting. I've experienced this 3 times already, haven't I? Even though it's later than usual, the fact that Jinwoo will be taught properly is a great relief. Outside, a massive storm erupted as thunder roared and lightning split the dark, jagged sky over the mountains. A massive, jagged crack suddenly appeared on the cavern, ceiling above them with a sharp hiss. The old man desperately shook the sleeping boy on the ground. Jinwoo, Jinwoo. Jinwoo rubbed his eyes groggily, drooling slightly. Grandpa. The old man gripped the bars, shouting over the roaring storm. Go down the mountain, quickly. Jinwoo blinked in confusion, asking what? Outside, the rain lashed furiously against the rocky mountain. I think this is no ordinary rain, the old man yelled. He stared intensely through the iron bars. You should go back to the Mount Hua sect and hide there for the time being. Jinwoo stayed put on the floor, looking up reluctantly. But to run away because of some rain is a little. The old man's eyes bulged with fierce urgency. I said go down immediately, he roared. Flinching from the sudden outburst, Jinwoo scrambled back. He stammered, okay. Jinwoo ran out of the cave just as the torrential rain hammered down on him in a heavy deluge. The relentless storm raged on, lightning flashing dangerously close to the treacherous rocky cliffs. The old man watched the boy disappear into the rain from the confines of his cell. Goodbye, be careful as you go down, he murmured softly. A deafening crash of thunder shattered the sky, shaking the very foundations of the dark mountain. Inside the cell, cold water began to leak heavily onto the old man's head. The puddle around his legs rapidly grew, the freezing water quickly rising past his ankles. He looked up at the fractured ceiling, where thick black mud began dripping steadily through the expanding cracks. He gritted his teeth, feeling the icy water soaking his muscular body. Damn it! Suddenly, the rock floor splintered with a sharp crack, water bursting upwards like a violent geyser. The old man quickly stood up, water pouring over him as he surveyed the collapsing cell. If this cave collapses, he thought grimly. A cynical laugh escaped him amidst the chaos. Nah, I shouldn't be too greedy. Haha, it's not like I've got anyone I know even if I get out. With a thunderous boom, a large boulder smashed through the floor directly beneath him, sending debris flying. A torrential waterfall burst from the ceiling with a roaring crash, burying him under a crushing weight of water and rock. The old man was forced down into a cross-legged position, enduring the heavy, splashing impact of the rushing flood. Outside, a massive section of the mountain gave way with a deafening rumble, causing a catastrophic landslide over the cave's entrance. Rocks shattered and tumbled violently as the entire cliffside collapsed under the relentless force of the storm. Giant boulders smashed into each other, entirely blocking the cavern path with a thunderous echo. The storm showed absolutely no mercy, relentless rain, washing over the newly formed pile of jagged rubble. Suddenly, a powerful fist burst through the pile of jagged rocks, exploding the heavy debris outward with raw strength. The old man clawed his way out of the rubble, gasping for air. Puha, if this is how things have turned out, and dying in there or out here is the same. He stood tall amidst the raging storm, dramatic lightning framing his imposing figure. Then, I might as well live a little longer. His intense, cinematic demeanor instantly broke as he drooled at a sudden thought. Eating always makes lives better. Let's go get some meat before I die, he yelled, practically tasting the imaginary feast. The torrential storm raged on, lightning striking over the dark, dense forest below. With a mighty shout of "Ha!" the old man leapt high into the stormy air, clearing the rocky obstacles with incredible ease. He landed gracefully but paused, a sudden thought hitting him with a sharp rustle. Jinmu might look for me back there, though, he muttered with a grunt. A wicked, toothy grin spread across his face. But if he found me dead there, he would be so sad. He'll probably like it if I suddenly appear and surprise him later, right? He chuckled mischievously. Leaving the destroyed cave behind, he shot off into the dark, stormy night, disappearing like a fleeting shadow in the rain. Mist veiled the towering green peaks of the Manhwa sect, painting a picture of tranquil isolation. The peace shattered as rapid footsteps echoed with a heavy thud. A panicked disciple burst through the wooden doors, shouting, "Sect leader, sect leader." Jang Jinmu, the esteemed Manhwa sect leader, paused his brushwork with a heavy sigh. He scolded, "How can someone who practices Taoism act so frivolously?" The flustered disciple bowed deeply, his voice shaking. "Forgive me, sect leader, but a strange phenomenon was discovered on Crashing Moon Peak." Jinmu raised an eyebrow in mild confusion. "Crashing Moon Peak, where is that?" The first-class disciple, Wang Jik, gestured vaguely in disbelief. "Do you not remember it? The western route up the mountain that got cut off because of a storm decades ago." A jolt of realization struck Jinmu like a physical blow. He gasped sharply, "Ah, that place." Wang Jik stroked his chin deep in thought as lightning flashed outside. Although it was a place not many visited because of its frequent avalanches, it is still strictly Manhwa sect territory. I wonder who dared set fire to that place. Jinmu stood up, a heavy solemnity washing over his face. He ordered, "Let us go take a look." Wang Jik's jaw dropped in shock. "Pardon, you are going to go personally." Without another word, the sect leader led his disciples through the grand stone courtyard. They halted abruptly at the perimeter wall, gazing out at the distant mountain where a thick plume of black smoke ascended into the sky. Jinmu's eyes widened in utter disbelief, his heart pounding against his ribs. A cold sweat broke out across his aged face. He muttered under his breath, "What?" He leaned forward, trembling with sudden, overwhelming urgency. "What happened to this place?" Wang Jik eyed his master cautiously, unsettled by the raw emotion. "Why are you suddenly acting like this? Is there something on the Crashing Moon Peak?" Jinmu's expression darkened with intense longing. "You are asking me if there is anything there? Of course there is." Memories washed over him in a vibrant wave. He thought of his younger self, laughing joyfully alongside his hidden master in those very mountains. The path to the peak was a treacherous expanse of shattered stone and deep ravines, battered by time. The small group navigated the ruined, rocky terrain with caution as the mist swirled around them. Disciples murmured among themselves in surprise. "Was not this place a cliff?" one asked. Wang Jik replied, "Yeah, I guess the avalanches created a path here." Jinmu stood silently at the precipice, staring down into the deep, misty chasm before him. With a sudden, explosive burst of energy, Jinmu leaped into the empty air, his robes fluttering fiercely. He glided gracefully across the massive gap. The disciples watched in pure awe. "The sect leader is truly amazing," one gasped. "No wonder they call him the immortal Taoist in the outside world." Jinwoo's hand securely grasped the jagged opposite cliff edge with a heavy thud. Hanging there over the void, immense guilt gnawed at his soul. He thought bitterly, "Have I been too indifferent?" His mind drifted to the dark, secluded stone cave of his youth. It was a sacred place where the original Taoist teachings, the precious void secret records, were kept hidden from the world. He remembered his master's gentle scolding from years ago. "Brat, you ought to wear shoes that fit your feet. Do you intend to cut off parts of your feet to fit a nice-looking shoe?" The wild-haired man behind the iron bars had patted his young head tenderly. "Usually, precious things are not commonly seen by others, so if fewer people recognize your talents, the more precious and rare you are." As he soared higher, Jinwoo's regret deepened with every passing second. He thought, "No matter how much time has passed and how old I have gotten, I should have visited here at least once." He pulled himself forcefully over the jagged rocks. He reflected sorrowfully, "As I traveled the Jianghu to expand my knowledge, I unwittingly became the Mount Hua sect leader." He closed his eyes in shame. "But even so, I should not have forgotten about this place. He is not someone I should forget about." Jinwoo flipped through the air and landed with flawless grace on the ruined peak. Suddenly he froze in place, the breath entirely leaving his lungs. There, taking shelter beneath the wide canopy of a solitary tree, sat a figure. The man sat perfectly cross-legged in the dust, as still as the mountains themselves. Jinwoo's legs gave out, and he dropped heavily to his knees, his hands hitting the sandy ground. Tears immediately threatened to spill from his wide, disbelieving eyes. The wild-haired man leaned lazily against the large tree trunk, soaking in the sunlight. Jinwoo, trembling gaze, perfectly reflected the man he thought he had lost forever to the ravages of time. The wild man looked down at him casually. "You are here?" he asked. A confident, knowing smirk crept across the wild man's rugged face. Jinwoo bowed until his forehead nearly touched the dirt. He cried out with his entire soul, "Sir." He vividly remembered the violent, stormy night of his childhood. Young Jinwoo had frantically bundled warm clothes together on the floor. He had muttered, "I hope Grandpa is all right. I need to get these clothes to him quickly." But before he could leave, the heavy wooden door creaked open. "Jinwoo, are you awake?" a stern voice called out. Startled, young Jinwoo turned around, clutching the fabric. "Yes, I was just about to head to the crashing moon peak." The elder sternly shook his head, cutting him off. "No, you must head to the southern heavenly temple right away. They are waiting for you." Hot tears streamed down young Jinwoo's face as he desperately protested. "Grandpa is waiting for me." A firm, unyielding hand grabbed his small wrist tightly, dragging him away and silencing his cries. He was brought out before the grand, imposing assembly of the sect's highest members. The elders showered the confused boy with praise. "Congratulations, Jinwoo. The Southern Heavenly Temple leader, known as the demon-repelling Taoist, has taken a liking to you." With a heavy, broken heart, the young boy was led away down the mountain path behind his new master. Years passed in a blur. Jinwoo trained relentlessly, his heavy wooden sword cutting fiercely through the autumn air. He grew into a strong, capable youth, weathering countless harsh, snowy winters with a smile. Eventually, he strode confidently out of the supreme Mount Hua sect gates as a full-fledged warrior. He returned to the mountain immediately, leaping incredibly high over the towering stone gates in a desperate search. His bare fingers bled as he clawed his way up the unforgiving, icy cliffs. He pushed his body far beyond its limits, scaling the impossible vertical drops through the blizzard. But when he finally reached the peak, his knees gave out, collapsing heavily onto the frozen earth. Finding nothing but sheer devastation, he screamed his absolute agony to the uncaring heavens. Weeping bitterly into the dirt, he lit a single incense stick for the master he thought perished in the violent avalanche. The tragic memory of that burning incense lingered like a massive phantom over the snowy peaks for decades. In the present, Jinwoo's voice broke violently as tears rolled freely down his wrinkled cheeks. "You were alive this whole time." Bare feet crunched softly and steadily against the sandy ground. The wild-haired man walked casually toward the weeping sect leader. He gently rested his large, rough hand on Jinwoo's bowed silver head. The man sighed softly, his voice full of warmth. A grown-up should not cry so easily. Jinwoo looked up, his heart overflowing with absolute reverence. "Sir." The man offered a fond, comforting smile, happy to see his old student. Suddenly, frantic shouts broke the tender reunion. "Sect leader, sect leader." The wild man flinched violently, his eyes darting wildly in sheer panic as the large group of disciples arrived. Wang Jik and the others gasped in absolute horror. "Sect leader, what is happening here? How could you be kneeling?" Jinwoo quickly scrubbed the shameful tears from his face with his wide sleeve. He rose to his feet with a soft, sliding sound, dusting off his robes to regain his dignity. He gestured grandly to the bewildered wild man. "Everyone, pay your respects. He is a great elder of our sect." The disciples exchanged utterly baffled glances. A great elder, pardon. Wang Jik frowned suspiciously, squinting hard. Forgive me, but I do not think I have seen him before. He does not look that old. Jinmu smiled brightly, brimming with unshakable pride. He is my master who enlightened me. Internally, the wild man panicked, screaming, Hey, hold up. The wild man sweated bullets, cursing his rotten luck. He thought desperately, damn it, I cannot believe he still thinks I am an elder of Manhwa sect. Another elder stepped forward, clearly perplexed. But sect leader hasn't your master, the former Southern Heavenly Temple leader, passed on a long time ago. Jinmu shook his head gently. He is the master that taught me when I was just a young boy. The disciples pressed. What is his name then? Jinmu turned to him with shining, expectant eyes. Sir, please tell me your name now. The wild man felt his very soul leave his body. He swallowed hard, completely trapped under the intense, judgmental scrutiny of the entire sect. The crowd waited in hushed, murmuring anticipation, while Jinmu simply beamed with unquestioning faith. The terrible truth flashed in the man's mind. He was actually the slaughterer demon monarch, Yom Siak, the great, bloodthirsty demon of the previous generation. Yom Siak nervously calculated his 0 odds of survival. He thought, if I say that, they will probably charge at me with their swords right. He looked at Jinmu's glowing, innocent face. He thought, the bigger problem is he will be put on the spot. Jinmu tilted his head slightly, prompting him gently, Sir. Yom Siak's mind raced in sheer, unadulterated panic. He stammered inwardly, damn it. He cleared his throat awkwardly, trying desperately to buy time. Ha, he thought. I need to give an answer quickly. Completely desperate, he squeezed his eyes shut and blurted out the very first fake name he could think of. My name is Han Ho. Everyone got shocked and said, the sword god. As you guys remember, Han Ho was the person who defeated the Yom. The instant the words left his mouth, he slapped both hands over his face in total horror. He screamed internally, shit, darn it, of all names, why did I say his? The disciples' jaws collectively dropped to the floor as they shrieked in absolute, unified shock. Sword god Han Ho. The protagonist sweated profusely as Jinmu turned to him in amazement. Jinmu asked, Sir, is that true? Waving his hands frantically, he stuttered that he was just kidding, and that wasn't actually his name. The protagonist staggered back as Jinmu stepped toward him, calling him sir. Suddenly, the entire group of disciples dropped to their knees, bowing deeply in the dirt. We pay our respects to the sword god, they chorused. Tears streamed down the disciples' faces as they prostrated themselves. I can't believe the sword god is in front of our eyes, one cried. This is the greatest honor of our sect. The sword god has descended. He stood frozen, utterly dumbfounded by the sheer absurdity of the situation. A lone crow flew past in the silent background. Trying to salvage the situation, he turned to the Jinmu and said, Hey, Jinmu, actually. But Jinmu was glowing with an almost holy light of pure admiration. You're our grand elder, he proclaimed happily. The protagonist's face fell into deep shadows, sweat rolling down his cheek. He groaned internally, oh shit. The scene shifted to the majestic, mist-covered peaks of the Manhwa sect, with beautiful waterfalls cascading down the lush green mountains. A grand flag bearing the sect's yin-yang symbol fluttered proudly in the crisp mountain wind. Snow began to fall gently over the elegant, traditional wooden roofs of the sect's buildings. A massive gathering of disciples stood in an orderly formation in the grand courtyard below the main hall. The disciples pumped their fists into the air with roaring enthusiasm. We pay our respects to the grand elder, they shouted. The elder disciples were just as ecstatic, yelling at the top of their lungs to pay their respects to the grand elder. Inside, the protagonist covered his ears, wincing from the sheer volume. He grumbled, My eardrums are about to burst, you bastards. The disciples continued their fanatical cheering, crying out how they couldn't believe the sword god was back and that he was a great person of the great Manhwa sect. He facepalmed with a heavy sigh. I can't believe I'm in this state because of a slip of tongue, he lamented. Shaking his fist in frustration, he thought, Phew, should I have just run away when they asked me who I am? He looked out at the glowing blue auras of the cheering disciples. He realized with dread, and the pure Taoist core energy is the direct opposite of my demonic energy, damn it. Jinmu stood beside him, smiling warmly. Please say something to the disciples of our sect, Jinmu requested. The protagonist pointed at himself, utterly baffled. What would someone like me say? Jinmu replied calmly, Didn't you give me good advice that I could easily understand when I was young? That'll suffice. He sweated nervously, cursing internally. Damn it, that was just some random stuff I heard from others. Jinmu bowed deeply beside him, prompting him to speak. Please enlighten our disciples, sir. Forced into a corner, he awkwardly raised his hands, looking visibly repulsed. Everyone, may you continue to advance towards spiritual awakening, and may your life be full of joy, he managed to choke out. The crowd erupted into thunderous cheers, deeply moved by his generic blessing. He stood there in deadpan silence, entirely unimpressed by his own words. Walking away briskly, he grumbled internally, "May your life be full of joy, my ass, that's so cringy." Suddenly, his eye caught something in the distance. He paused, humming in curiosity. Behind him, Jinmu and the elders were weeping tears of profound awe. As expected of the sword god, so wise, they praised loudly. He glanced back, completely bewildered by their dramatic reaction. "The way they're talking," he muttered. His mind flashed to the wild, rowdy warriors of the demonic cult, roaring with fierce, terrifying loyalty. A dark shadow crossed his face as he compared the two groups. Why are they being so rowdy when they're not even demonic cultists? He wondered. Back inside, Jinmu beamed with pride. "It seems there's a great future for Manhwa sect," the old man said gleefully. The protagonist stared at Jinmu, sighing heavily. He thought he was smart when he was young, though. The view shifted to a perilous, craggy cliff side along the mountain path. They arrived at an elegant building named the Wandering Pavilion. Once inside, the protagonist finally snapped, pointing aggressively at Jinmu. "What do you want me to do?" he demanded. Jinmu looked back with wide, innocent eyes. "Sir," he began softly. The protagonist leaned over the table, gesturing wildly. He stuttered that he was already old and couldn't teach anyone, lying that he had forgotten all of the sect's martial arts. Sweating bullets, he thought in a panic. He wants me to teach Manhwa sect disciples. I'd be coming up with an even bigger lie than calling myself Han-Ho. Jinmu bowed respectfully, unfazed by the outburst. "Sir, no, Grand Elder, please show kindness to our younger generations as well." Veins popped on the protagonist's forehead as he shouted in exasperation. "Hey, you brat! How could I, who doesn't know a single Manhwa sect martial art, teach them anything at all?" Jinmu smiled gently, placing a hand over his heart. "I know it's shameless of me to make that request, but I'm not asking you to groom our disciples into some great martial masters." The protagonist crossed his arms, nodding slightly with relief. Jinmu added, "How could I trouble someone who's as old as you and disrupt your pure training?" The protagonist thought happily. "Yeah, you're a good boy, so I know you wouldn't do anything like that." Jinmu gave a wide, knowing smile. "I hope you can help them understand difficult scriptures." The protagonist choked on his own breath, eyes widening in shock. "And when you're free, let's research the martial arts of Manhwa sect that have been lost." Jinmu casually dropped the bomb. His face contorted into an expression of pure, unadulterated horror. "Understand what? Do what in my free time?" he practically shrieked. Turning his back, he crossed his arms stubbornly and huffed. "No," he declared flatly. Jinmu tried to persuade him, leaning forward. "Grand Elder, sir," but the protagonist refused to budge. "I said no." He looked away, his expression firm and serious. "HMPH, I don't care, I will never do that, I won't compromise," he vowed to himself. Jinmu, eyes widened with desperate sincerity. "You were the one who caused me to dream and desire for a future." A memory flashed, a gentle hand patting the head of a young, smiling Jinmu. Jinmu's voice echoed, "You were also the one who comforted me when I was having a tough time." More memories flooded in, a younger Jinmu wielding a wooden sword and the protagonist watching over him. "You were also the one who provided me with hope as I overcame adversities," Jinmu continued. The protagonist turned his head away sharply, blushing slightly with embarrassment. He grunted, "HMPH." Jinmu smiled warmly, his eyes closed in deep respect. "I hope the kids at Manhwa sect will use your teaching as guidance and overcome the world." The protagonist's resolve wavered, a complicated look in his eyes as he whispered, "Jinmu." Sometime later, two guards stood at attention in front of the grand, red doors of the Mystic Palace, the sect's secret martial art manual repository. Heavy footsteps approached. The guards turned in shock as the protagonist appeared before them. "Oh, Grand Elder, we pay our respects to you, Grand Elder," they announced. He offered a smooth, reassuring smile. "I'm here because I need to take a look at something. Can I go in? The sect leader has given me permission." The guards bowed enthusiastically, practically bending in half, stuttering their agreement to let him inside. He winced and rubbed his ear. "Gosh, my ears, you guys are going to burst my eardrums," he complained. Inside, the repository was vast and dimly lit, filled with towering rows of ancient bookshelves. He stood at the entrance, taking it all in. His hand reached out, sliding a heavy book containing the names of Manhwa sect disciples off a shelf. Flipping through the pages, he muttered nervously, "Han-ho, Han-ho, Han-ho." He finally found the thick old ledger, holding it up with a heavy thud. He flipped rapidly through the pages, his anxiety spiking. "I did buy some time by making a request to Jinmu, but it's not enough time," he thought. Tossing the book to the floor in sheer frustration, he ripped at his own hair. "Ugh, Jinmu, that rascal, why is he expecting so much of me?" A flashback showed Jinmu nodding slightly. "Would a few days be sufficient?" he had asked. The protagonist had glared at him with his arms crossed. "Aren't you pestering me too much? How could I organize decades of teachings in a few days?" Jinmu had asked how long he needed. The protagonist stuttered and awkwardly asked for at least a few months. Jinmu had bowed submissively. "There's no helping it then. In that case, I hope you'll give some good advice to the youngsters of our sect." The protagonist's face had contorted into a furious scowl. What did you say? He had yelled. Jinmu had maintained his serene expression. If you say something to those who are just starting out so that they won't go astray, wouldn't they become strong pillars of our sex in the future? Back in the present, the protagonist gritted his teeth, suppressing a violent urge. Should I just beat this guy up? He fumed. Suddenly, his fingers brushed against a specific manual. He pulled it out with a soft sliding sound. Found it. He held the manual proudly, a confident smirk replacing his anger. With a sharp flick, he fanned the pages out. He rapidly flipped through the ancient text, the pages rustling loudly in the quiet room. The manual detailed various internal energy techniques, including the 18 energy arts and the 5-element demon repelling technique. The list went on forever, covering sword techniques, fist techniques, and illusionary arts. The sheer volume of profound martial arts was overwhelming. The protagonist's knees gave out, and he collapsed to the floor with a heavy thud. He sat there utterly stupefied, his jaw hanging open as he stared blankly ahead. Cold sweat poured down his face as the crushing reality set in. I'm screwed, he realized in pure horror. His mind spun uncontrollably as he screamed internally. Why are there so many of them? He stared at the massive stack of texts in dismay. He wondered, why are there so many of them? With a soft flutter of pages, he rapidly flipped through the dense volume. He read a passage about fallen leaves returning to the earth to nourish the trees. He thought, shameless bastard. He erupted in anger, yelling, shameless bastard. He learned so many ultimate techniques himself, but he tells others to become dust. Eat shit, live a miserable life. Gripping the book tightly, he glared over the pages. He whispered, I'm sure he's lying. I'm sure he was just acting like he learned all those martial arts to look good, he concluded. Yeah, how could someone learn all that? He must be bluffing. Tossing the useless books aside with heavy thuds, he declared, I'll start by learning Manhwa Sect's basic energy art, 18 energy arts. He carefully slid a dark, unmarked tome from the dusty shelf. With a crisp rustle, he opened the worn manual. Rubbing his chin, he studied the contents with intense focus. Dark, sinister energy pulsed around him with a low hum as he began to cultivate. A confident smirk crept across his face. Suddenly, a warm trickle of blood slid down his nostril. He wiped his lip, staring at the crimson stain in confusion. Without warning, 2 violent streams of blood erupted from his nose. He clamped a hand over his mouth in shock. He yelled, what? Staring at his bloody palm, he stuttered, what is happening? A massive geyser of dark blood spewed violently from his mouth. He collapsed to his knees, hacking and coughing up blood onto the floor. Choking and gagging, he struggled desperately to catch his breath. Trembling, he asked, why did this suddenly happen? Another heavy splash of blood violently painted the floor beneath him. He wiped his stained beard, realizing his fatal mistake. Damn it, it seems my insides are a mess because my demonic martial arts clashes with Manhwa Sect's Taoism internal energy cultivation techniques. Later that night, a white-haired elder gazed toward the grand building. He whispered, Sir. The elder's eyes sparkled with sheer admiration. Is he looking after the future of Manhwa Sect this late at night? Bowing deeply in the courtyard, the elder murmured, I hope he'll lead us for a long time and become the foundation of our sect. Morning sun finally breached the misty mountain peaks. Exhausted, the grand elder slumped over a table holding a bronze mirror. He complained, gosh, this is so tiring. Staring at his haggard reflection, he sighed. I'm circulating energy with Manhwa Sect's techniques and using the slaughterer demon art to heal my internal injuries. I'm one crazy bastard. Propping up his aching head, he muttered, that was only possible because my demonic energy wasn't dense. Otherwise, I would have died last night. 3 sharp knocks echoed from the door. A voice called out, Grand Elder, are you up? Annoyed, he replied, I'm awake, I'll be out soon. With an angry grunt, he aggressively stuffed rolled-up paper deep into his bleeding nostrils. He arrived at the towering wooden gates of the Azure Academy. A group of young disciples rushed toward him excitedly, shouting, It's the Grand Elder. The children bowed respectfully. May your life be full of joy, Grand Elder, he replied coolly. I'll be looking after you guys. But inside, he sneered. To hell with joy in life. Why are there so many damn precocious kids? One small girl bowed deeply. May you achieve immortal ascension. He recoiled in sheer horror. Immortal ascension? Are you hoping that I will die soon? Clearing his throat, he composed himself. That's not funny, kids. You guys know who I am. The children cheered with bright smiles. You're the Grand Elder, Sword God, yes. He chuckled warmly. Now that's more like normal children. Yeah, I'm the Sword God, Han-ho. Instantly, the kids pressed their hands together in solemn prayer, chanting, May your life be full of joy. He let out an exasperated sigh. You guys, why do you keep saying that? Placing his hands on his hips, he demanded, From now on when you're with me, you are forbidden from saying that. Got it? The children murmured among themselves in utter confusion. Losing his patience, he roared, Answer me. A brave disciple raised his hand. Grand Elder, how could you say something like that? The boy stood his ground. That's not something we can do as a disciple of a Taoist sect. The crowd of kids nodded and whispered in agreement. He crossed his arms, thinking bitterly, seeing as how they are so stubborn over something like this, they are indeed Taoists. He glared down at them, speaking sternly, children should act like children. Another kid protested defiantly, but to hope that we, who are training in the ways of Taoism, to act like children. He snapped, screaming at the top of his lungs, you brats, summer can only come when spring is gone, and autumn needs to arrive for us to know that winter will be here soon. The poor child trembled violently in fear. He continued his fierce lecture. No one becomes an adult overnight. Children should act like children and teenagers like teenagers. You must go through all that in order to become a wise old man. Are you guys trying to act like old men with bent backs already? Pumping his fist, he shouted, life is only fun when you act your age, when I was your age. He repeated with fiery passion, when I was your age. The disciples just stared up at him in blank silence. Slowly, their eyes began to sparkle with eager anticipation for a grand story. Cold sweat broke out on his face as he realized his mistake. He thought, when I was your age. He hesitated, stammering, when I was their age. His mind flashed back to his childhood, happily riding on the shoulders of a rugged man in the snow. He remembered rolling dice into a wooden cup. He remembered gleefully drinking and gambling in a shady tavern. He remembered giggling like a creep while peeping at a woman's silhouette. He stood perfectly still, his expression turning deadly serious. Sweat poured down his face. He forcefully yelled, in any case. The kids flinched, completely lost. Coughing awkwardly, he deflected, I'll tell you some stories about my past instead. The children instantly lit up, throwing their hands in the air. Grand Elder, I've got something I'd like to hear about. He leaned in with a warm, deceptive smile. Oh, sure, tell me what it is. What do you want to hear about? A bright-eyed boy requested, the story about how you took down the great demon. His smile froze. He stuttered, the story about me taking down what? The children began chanting enthusiastically. The great demon, slaughterer demon monarch. His eyes widened in absolute shock as he heard his own past title. The kids cheered, throwing their arms up. The story about how you took down the great demon, slaughterer demon monarch. He looked utterly defeated, his soul seemingly leaving his body. A girl said, Grand Elder, I heard you were the strongest in the world and killed Yom Siak with your pinky finger. Another boy argued, no, he chopped off Yom Siak's head with a slash of the sword. It plunked into the ground. Veins throbbed on his forehead. He screamed in his mind, you little rascals, is Yom Siak your friend or what? How dare you mention my name so casually? An older boy scolded the others. Junior brother, you are talking too frivolously. He gasped in relief. He thought, finally, someone who has got his head right. The older boy continued with a peaceful smile. He's just a vicious villain that deserves to die. Not even deep frying his head in shit would be enough. Another boy agreed eagerly. Yeah, that's how someone who is that evil should die. The girl beamed up at him. Grand Elder, the great demon Yom Siak has killed countless people, hasn't he? They bombarded him with rumors. I heard he killed so many farmers that their blood formed a river. He wasn't just a murderer, but also an arsonist, con artist, and thief. He was said to rape women wherever he went. He furiously ground his teeth together, blood boiling. He thought, what are they saying I did? Those narrow-minded, filthy, and underhanded Mount Hua sect bastards. With one eye glowing ominously, he forced a crazed smile. Yeah, I cut off the head of the villain, Yom Siak, in a single strike. I cut off the head of that very, very evil Yom Siak. The children erupted into joyous cheers, praising the sword god as he sharply turned his back to them. Clenching his fist, tears of immense frustration streamed down his face. He muttered, Han ho, you evil bastard. The scene opens high above the expansive training grounds, an ocean of gray tiles where disciplines stand in rigid rows. Looking down with a heavy sigh, the protagonist grumbled, don't ask me about the past. His eyes narrowed with a fierce, burning intensity. Frustration boiling over, he yelled, why isn't anyone answering me? The surrounding disciples just stared back in stony, awkward silence. He crossed his arms and huffed in annoyance. Stepping forward with a heavy thud, he leaned in and demanded, isn't there anything you want to ask me? The disciple just looked away, completely speechless. The protagonist threw his head back and groaned, gosh, seriously, even talking trash about myself would be better than this. Suddenly, a brilliant idea struck him. He let out a loud gasp of realization. Chuckling darkly, he thought, no, there's no need for me to tire myself out by speaking, is there? He aggressively pointed his finger at a random disciple, snapping, hey, you there, what's your name? The startled man placed a hand on his chest and replied, I'm Ban Woonson, a first-class disciple. The protagonist sized him up, waving a hand dismissively. You look like you've got a lot of experience roughing things out. I guess you've traveled quite a bit through the martial arts world, huh? Ban Woonson's jaw dropped, utterly bewildered by the strange accusation. The other disciples immediately began whispering among themselves. One stuttered in disbelief, asking what senior brother Ban Woonson spat out. Another muttered, roughing things out. Realizing his slip-up, the protagonist coughed into his fist and explained smoothly, I usually live alone and don't care for formalities, so it came out a little crude. An older disciple simply nodded slowly, seemingly accepting the ridiculous excuse. The protagonist wiped imaginary sweat from his chest, thinking, phew, I almost got screwed. A wicked grin spread across his face as he thought, these naive fools would believe me if I told them I was going to ride a crane and become an immortal tomorrow. He shook his head, looking around at the sea of gullible faces. With so many innocent guys here, how do they produce someone as vicious as Han Ho? Seriously. Snapping back to reality, he narrowed his eyes and asked, how much of the world have you experienced? He leaned in, his tone growing serious. Do you know what the situation in the Murim is like nowadays? Crossing his arms, he towered over the kneeling disciple. Tell me about them. Van Woonson stared up at him, thoroughly confused, and blurted, what? Looking away to hide his lie, the protagonist shrugged. I've been practicing Taoism for too long in remote mountains. I don't know what's happening outside nowadays. Van Woonson scratched his head awkwardly. Ooh, where should I start? The protagonist aggressively shoved his thumb towards his own chest with a heavy thud, demanding, who is this? Van Woonson flinched back, replying, pardon. The protagonist clicked his tongue in disappointment. I'm asking you who the strongest in the world is. He looked down his nose at the crowd. Start from who is the strongest and then move down the line. After that, list who the leaders of the different groups are in order. Van Woonson sweated profusely, muttering, what do you mean by spill out? Losing his patience, the protagonist slammed his fist into his chest with a heavy thump and roared, I'm asking you to tell me about them. Van Woonson bowed hastily. Ah, yes, Grand Elder, so in the current Murim, the publicly acknowledged strongest martial master is. The surrounding disciples leaned in, murmuring in agreement as the grand lecture began. Van Woonson gestured excitedly, also about the Murim alliance. The scene transitions to a magnificent, towering pagoda nestled in lush mountains. Sunlight gleams off the grand rooftops of the Dragon Heaven Manor. A bumblebee buzzes softly, landing on a pristine white blossom. With a sharp, clean snip, a pair of scissors cuts a beautiful white peony from its stem. A woman with flowing black hair, tied elegantly with a ribbon, stands gracefully in the garden. The quiet serenity is broken by the soft crunch of boots approaching her on the stone path. Administrator Seo bows deeply, announcing, young miss, I am Administrator Seo. Without turning, she looks over her shoulder at the vibrant bushes and says smoothly, it seems you are thinking about what you should cut. She nods subtly, her dark hair shifting in the gentle breeze. Administrator Seo pauses, thoughtfully holding a massive white peony in his hands. He clears his throat and reports, we have heard bizarre news from the Manhwa sect. The shears pause dangerously close to a red blossom. She asks, Manhwa sect. A bead of sweat rolls down Seo's cheek as he reveals, there are reports that the sword god was alive this whole time. She remains still, questioning, was there a martial master in the Murim that was worthy of being called the sword god? Seo nods solemnly. Several centuries ago, there used to be one in the Manhwa sect. There was an extraordinary swordsman known as Han Ho. He is the sword god. With a sudden, decisive snip, she severs the red flower. If he is from several centuries ago, how old is he now? She asks. Seo answers, he is older than 160 years old. Leaves flutter down around Administrator Seo as he waits for her reaction. The wind rustles through the tall trees as she asks, what do you think of the sword god's appearance? Turning slightly, her long hair blowing in the wind, she probes further. What is the situation of the Manhwa sect right now? Seo explains, they used to be one of the 6 great sects, but they have not produced any noticeable people for a while because they are not doing so well. They are not taking anyone's side. She reaches out to gently touch a blooming magnolia branch. Who is the current sect leader? She inquires. Seo answers, someone known as the immortal Taoist Zhang Jinmu. The dark image of a solemn swordsman holding a scabbard flashes by as Seo continues. While he is not one of the top 10 martial masters, it is simply because he does not do much in the Murim, so no one knows much about him. As someone who leads his sect, he is very capable. He is an honest person who fervently practices Taoism. Unimpressed, she states, there is nothing interesting about him then. Now fully visible, the elegant and composed Yon Sanhung deduces coldly. Not doing much in the Murim means he won't be able to improve much. Being honest also means he is poor. That also means the sect's finances are not in good condition. Looking down at the paved stone, she adds, practicing Taoism means he is more interested in achieving things for himself and is too lazy to groom the next generation. Since he is not grooming anyone, it means he is not performing his role as the leader well. She casually drops a withered red flower onto the ground. In the Murim, you cannot do everything by yourself. The dead blossom lands on the cold stone. She remarks, even if a withered flower blooms again, it is still just a withered flower. It won't fit in with the rest of the garden. Her eyes harden with absolute conviction. A sword god from 100 years ago is already outdated. He is not this era's sword god. The scene shifts back to the majestic, misty peaks of the Manhwa sect. The protagonist rubs his chin in deep thought. So, the Murim alliance went down, the heavenly evil alliance split up, and the demonic cult is missing. His golden eyes flare with an intense, otherworldly light. Such a situation is rare in the Murim's history. In his mind's eye, the great factions swirl together. He wonders, the balance between orthodox, unorthodox, and demonic factions wouldn't fall that easily, though. He raises an eyebrow, rolling a name over his tongue. Winter Heaven Yon Jungsen. Ban Wunsen nods seriously. Yes, he is the strongest in the world right now. Sitting casually on the floor, the protagonist asks, since Manhwa sect is a sword sect, is it in an alliance with the Northern Sword Association? The disciples reply in unison, no. He leans forward. No, the Southern Blade Troop then? A disciple sweats and answers, that's not the case. Ban Wunsen explains tentatively. The sect leader says that being involved in the power struggle of the world will corrupt the purity of a Taoist sect. They all sit together in a huddle, discussing the grim reality of their situation as murmurs fill the air. The protagonist's face went utterly blank. Pure shock radiated from his eyes as he stammered in disbelief. What did you say? The Manhwa sect has fallen. Perched on the roof under the starry sky, he stared into the distance. He thought in disbelief, I can't believe it. To think that one of the 6 great sects, the Manhwa sect, would have fallen like this. His expression darkened as he continued to ponder. The Murim is a place where it's hard to survive if you don't belong to any groups. He let out a heavy sigh, a cloud of vapor escaping his lips in the cold air. The Manhwa sect of the sword god who defeated me turned into this crap. He rested his hands on his knees, his face twisting in intense annoyance. Although I'd have won if it was a one-on-one fight. I can't believe they cowardly fought me in a group, that sly Han-ho bastard. A cold gust of wind swept past him as he looked out over the quiet, desolate buildings below. His eyes narrowed in sheer frustration. One of the 6 great sects, the top of the 5 mountain sword sects, the great Manhwa sect. Images of the sect's current state flashed through his mind, showing young and old disciples dressed in ragged, patched clothes. He remembered them toiling away, shoveling dirt and carrying rocks like common laborers, and training tirelessly in the freezing snow under the pale moonlight. He muttered, his voice heavy with disappointment. The Manhwa sect in my memories is nowhere to be seen right now. He hopped down from the roof with a soft thud. Even if it can't be like the tail of a dragon, it should be at least the head of a snake. Clutching his head in pure despair, he whined, Han-ho, you don't deserve the sword god title. It's wasted on you. He pulled at his hair, his face a mask of furious exasperation. This is all because of Han-ho. The next morning, the peaceful silence of the courtyard was broken by the sound of heavy, dry coughing. A disciple approached the sect leader's quarters carrying a wooden tray of tea, his face filled with concern. He asked, Sect leader, are you coming down with a cold? Silence hung heavily in the air. The disciple thought to himself, feels all right, but like there's still something wrong. He called out again, Sect leader. A weak voice replied from inside, come on in. With a soft creak, the disciple slid the wooden door open. The sect leader, Jinmu, sat weakly in his bed looking completely exhausted. He let out a faint, a hum. The disciple looked at him, surprised. He thought, I guess he slept in today. He's usually prepared by now, though. Setting the tray down, the disciple casually remarked, I didn't know there were days you slept in too, sect leader. Jinmu's face suddenly flushed with angry indignation. He yelled, Ho-ho, you brat, you're always getting nagged at for being late, but you're trying to lecture me just because I slept in once. The disciple threw his hands up in a total panic. He quickly apologized. Gosh, please don't say something like that. How would I dare? Before he could finish, Jinmu slumped forward, collapsing onto the bedding with a heavy thud. The disciple screamed in sheer terror, Sect leader. Somewhere else, golden eyes snapped wide open in sudden shock. The Grand Elder spun around, his face pale. He demanded what? Jinmu collapsed. He slammed the door open with a loud crash, asking, Where is he now? The frightened disciple stuttered. Yes, Grand Elder, he's at his abode. Without wasting a single second, the Grand Elder sprinted across the courtyard, moving like an absolute blur. He leaped across the high rooftops with tremendous speed, the wind roaring past him. He yelled, Jinmu. He descended toward the medical courtyard, landing with a heavy impact that startled the elders present. His feet smashed into the stone tiles, kicking up a heavy cloud of dust and debris. One of the elders threw his arm up to shield his face, completely bewildered. He shouted, Grand Elder. The Grand Elder roughly grabbed the man by his robes, his eyes wild with panic. Where's Jinmu? How is he? Tell me how Jinmu is. A quiet breeze blew past the ornate eaves of the building. Inside the dim room, the Grand Elder sat anxiously at the edge of Jinmu's bed. He gently took the frail, trembling hand of the unconscious sect leader. He whispered, Jinmu. An elder stood behind him, speaking in a solemn tone. He's not sick, so you need not be too worried. He's just become frail because of his old age. The Grand Elder looked down at Jinmu's sleeping face, a heavy sorrow washing over his features. The medical elder reassured him. He'll be fine since I've told the medicine hall to prepare herbal medicine that will help him recover his energy. The elders bowed respectfully. We'll take our leave now, they said, quietly exiting the room. Left alone in the quiet room, the Grand Elder continued to watch over Jinmu, carefully adjusting the covers. He frowned, a mix of pity and frustration in his voice. Brat, I was still full of energy at your age. How can your body fail of old age when you're just slightly over 60? Clenching Jinmu's hands, he muttered bitterly, darn slaughterer demon art. If it weren't a demonic art, I'd use body purification to heal you. But because my core is made of demonic energy, not only would I be of no help, I'd harm and corrupt the pure energy inside you. Jinmu's eyes twitched slightly. The Grand Elder whispered, I wouldn't mind giving everything I have to help you if I could. Suddenly, Jinmu shifted. The Grand Elder leaned back slightly, realizing he was waking up. He quickly let go and respectfully smoothed out the blanket over the old man's chest. Outside, a bright full moon hung high in the clear night sky. Jinmu let out a weak, raspy groan as consciousness finally returned to him. He slowly fluttered his tired, heavy eyes open. The Grand Elder hovered right over him, shouting in relief, Are you awake? Jinmu looked up at him, his voice barely a whisper, Sir. The Grand Elder held his hands together tightly. They say your energy is failing because of old age. Unable to hold back his worry, the Grand Elder suddenly exploded. How can you not take care of your body? How can you be so thoughtless when you are the sect leader? Unfazed by the yelling, Jinmu simply looked at him with tired, apologetic eyes. My apologies. The Grand Elder's anger immediately melted into gentleness. He patted the blanket reassuringly. It's still night, go get some more sleep. He stared down at the sect leader, his expression firming up with a newfound resolve. Leaning in, he asked softly, What can I do for you? Jinmu looked away slightly, his voice heavy with responsibility. Please take care of Manhwa sect's disciples for the time being. The Grand Elder's golden eyes narrowed sharply in determination. He gave a firm, confident nod. All right. With that promise secured, Jinmu closed his eyes and drifted peacefully back to sleep. The Grand Elder clasped his hands together in a silent prayer. He whispered, Jinmu, things will be okay. The next day, under a clear blue sky, he arrived at the finance hall, the place where Manhwa sect's finances were strictly managed. Inside, a plump, sweating man bowed deeply. Grand Elder, I'm Wang Shimbang, the finance hall leader. The Grand Elder sat behind a large wooden desk, crossing his arms and glaring down at Wang with an intimidating aura. He asked sharply, You're in charge of Manhwa sect's finances, right? Wang smiled nervously, trying to remain polite. Yes, Grand Elder. The Grand Elder grabbed a thick ledger from the desk and flipped through the pages with a rapid rustle. He stopped and pointed at the book. Is this the ledger with Manhwa sect's finance records? Yes, that's right, Wang replied. The Grand Elder frowned and asked, Why are there only expenses and no income? Sweating profusely, Wang explained, There aren't a lot of expenses either. Wang gave a miserable smile and added, The medicine needed for the sect leader, who has become frail and old, is expensive. The Grand Elder clicked his tongue in extreme annoyance. Tisk, aren't there disciples in Manhwa sect living outside? Wang looked totally confused and asked, Living outside? Yeah. The Grand Elder pressed on, demanding, How many of them are living outside of Manhwa now? Wang shook his head side to side, avoiding eye contact. Ooh, none. The Grand Elder froze in absolute shock. What? Zero? Not a single one. He slammed his fist onto the table with a tremendous bang, startling Wang. He roared, How is that possible? We're talking about the great Manhwa sect, Shanxi's greatest sect, the home to the Purple Dawn mystic art and Plum Blossom sword technique. We don't have any external disciples. Wang lowered his gaze nervously. He mumbled, Since no one from the outside world asked us to teach them. The Grand Elder rubbed his temples, feeling a massive headache coming on. He asked, What about external disciples? Wang asked, clearly confused, Affiliate disciples, as in external disciples. The Grand Elder yelled, Doesn't matter. Anyone who's learned even a little martial arts from Manhwa sect. Wang carefully nodded, choosing his words. We do have some, but... The Grand Elder slapped the desk and leaned forward fiercely. Ask them all to come back. Wang flinched, utterly baffled by the command. He asked, What? The Grand Elder pounded his fist on the table, barking his orders. Not just from Shanxi, but from the whole of Central Plains. Send a messenger bird with a short message to get them back here. Ask them to come back right away after seeing the letter. No need to reply or anything. Wang held up his hands to pacify him. He stammered, What? That's not very polite. The Grand Elder pounded the table so hard it rattled the room. He bellowed, To hell with darn manners. He roared, pointing an accusing finger. The main sect wants to see them and they dare to reject. Does Manhwa sect not have any discipline at all? Wang nervously stuttered. That's not it, Grand Elder. I'm not very bright, so please stop raising your voice. The Grand Elder sat back down, crossing his arms like a mob boss. Prioritize sending messenger birds to affiliate sects that are doing well and operate martial clans, martial academies, and escort agencies. Send it to affiliate sects that look like they have money. Wang blinked in utter confusion. Pardon? Why would we prioritize them first? The Grand Elder's fist hit the table again with a heavy thud as he yelled. Just do as I say and stop asking so many questions. Trembling under the intense pressure, Wang quickly bowed and stuttered. Yes, Grand Elder, I will do as instructed, but... The Grand Elder shot him a piercing, deadly glare. But what? Wang kept his head bowed. Our sect's current situation isn't the same as we were in the past. While this might sound disrespectful, even if we tell them it's the sect leader's orders, there's no guarantee that they'll respond to it. The Grand Elder rested his head on his hand, a sly, confident smirk forming on his lips. Tell them there's one more person other than the sect leader that wants to see them. Wang looked up, completely clueless as to who he meant. What? The Grand Elder's eye flared with an intense, golden energy, his aura crackling with intimidating power. He grinned and said, tell them the Sword God wants to see them. The Sword God Han-Ho from 100 years ago wants to see them. The disciple carefully handed over a steaming bowl, saying softly, Sect leader, please have this medicine. The sect leader took the bowl with a weak grasp. Thanks, he muttered. He brought the bowl to his lips, gulping down the bitter liquid. As he took the empty bowl back, the disciple smiled gently. Everything's all right, so please focus on your recuperation, sect leader. The sect leader paused, looking up with a hint of concern. Aren't you curious about what the Grand Elder has been doing? He asked. He let out a dry chuckle. You must be a ghost, huh? The disciple flinched. Come on, how could you say that? I simply achieved the enlightenment of clairvoyance. The sect leader sighed, cutting him off. Brat, stop talking nonsense and get to the topic. The disciple's expression turned serious. Grand Elder has been really busy. The sect leader blinked in surprise. He is. The disciple gripped the bowl tighter. After you collapsed. He's been stuck in the Mystic Palace and doesn't come out, the disciple explained. He would then suddenly summon people and get them to show him what martial arts they have been training in. He added, he's been doing that for more than 5 days straight. The disciple's eyes widened as he remembered another detail. Oh, and one more thing. He instructed Senior Brother Wang to get all of the disciples living outside and external disciples from all over the country to come back here. A bead of sweat rolled down his cheek. I think the Grand Elder is planning something big. The sect leader closed his eyes, a weary sigh escaping his lips. The disciple gestured animatedly. They say that he went into the Mystic Palace 3 days ago and hasn't come out since. Meanwhile, the imposing structure of the Mystic Palace stood silently under the bright sky. Inside, a thick book flew across the room with a sharp swoosh. Taoism is about emptying? A voice shouted in sheer frustration. Another manual sailed through the air. Only when you don't chase after. This isn't it either. Keep going until you are enlightened. Keep going, my ass. Books rained down like confetti. Manuals were tossed left and right in a frenzy. Among the world's Taoists? Fuck, darn Taoism again. The Grand Elder collapsed onto the floor with a heavy thud, utterly defeated. These darn Taoist bastards, darn Manhwa sect, he yelled at the ceiling. He let out a long, pathetic sigh. Why is it so difficult to find an impressive secret mystic art manual? He shook his head weakly, still sprawled on the ground. Why do Manhwa sect's mystic arts all sound like you're supposed to catch clouds? Staring blankly, he grumbled. It's all about being one with nature and stuff like that. What kind of secret manual is like that? He began thrashing around on the floor like a giant toddler. Damn it, I can't even use what I've learned for my entire life. Arg. His mind drifted back to the ailing sect leader's words. What can I do for you? Please take care of Manhwa sect's disciples. The Grand Elder gritted his teeth, his eyes flaring with newfound resolve. He shot up from the floor. So what? I'm the slaughterer demon monarch, Yom Siak. I won't give up like this, he roared. I'll show these darn Taoist bastards what enlightenment is about. His golden eye gleamed with manic determination. He snatched a red manual from the pile with a firm grip. It read, Heavenly Descending Sword Manual. He flipped it open with a crisp rustle. I'll just memorize it for now, he decided. His face was a mask of intense concentration. His eyes scanned the ancient text. It stated, if you train hard and forget about eating and sleeping, you'll be able to attain a small achievement within 20 years. He paused, tilting his head. What does this mean? With a flick of his wrist, he tossed the manual away. He seamlessly grabbed another book from the messy pile. The pages fluttered rapidly as he searched for something useful. The next manual read, if you train hard and forget about eating and sleeping, you'll be able to attain a small achievement within 40 years. He threw that one over his shoulder without a second thought. Next up was the limitless sword technique. He groaned, staring at the cover. Damn it, this is one of Han-Ho's ultimate techniques. It was a really annoying one. He opened the book with a heavy puff of breath. His eyes widened as he read. Hanho started to read through the horrors of the limitless sword technique, which was quicker than compared to the small achievement for the sake of the future generations. He frantically flipped through the pages, sweat beading on his face. This is no time to be picky. I need to choose what is practical. Yeah, being practical is the way to go. He turned around, examining the text closer. Since he's called the Sword God, there must be something different about him as compared to the others. And he didn't learn just one martial art, but rather various martial arts, so I'm sure there's some kind of secret knowledge. The manual read, "There's no end to learning. Don't be swayed by your emotions and keep improving." It continued, "An impatient heart won't help you attain anything, but not attaining anything is also a way of Taoism." He stared at the profound words, completely speechless. He suddenly dropped the book and grabbed his head, letting out an ear-piercing scream. "I can't understand it." Outside the palace gates, loud crashes and screams echoed. The two guards flinched. One guard whispered nervously, "Grand Elder is going into a frenzy again." The other guard quickly shushed him. "Hey, mind your words. How dare you utter such disrespectful words?" The first guard coughed, looking away. That was a slip of tongue. The guard looked up at the towering palace. "I guess he's met some troubles while trying to improve," he noted solemnly. He turned around, shaking his head. To think someone who was called the Sword God 100 years ago is working this hard. The other guard frowned, clearly concerned. "I'm a little worried. He shouldn't overwork himself since he is quite old already." Together, they bowed deeply towards the sealed doors. "Thank you, Grand Elder, for working so hard for Manhwa's future." Meanwhile, the Grand Elder was fuming. "How can there be no results yet? Damn it." He looked like a zombie, dark circles hanging heavily under his bloodshot eyes. Since I spent the night reading, my eyes feel like someone's blinded them with sand." He turned his back on the mess, trudging away with heavy steps. "Sigh, I don't care anymore." He stopped at the door, rubbing his chin. "Shall I head over to the Azure Academy?" A small, exhausted smile crept onto his face. "Maybe my frustration will be appeased after I see those cute kids laughing." He soon arrived at the gates of the Azure Academy, but something felt off. The courtyard was completely empty, with only dry leaves blowing across the dirt. He looked around, puzzled. Why is it so quiet? He carefully slid open the door to the training hall and peeked inside. Inside, rows of young disciples were sitting completely still in silent meditation. His face fell flat. Gosh, they look just like those monks in the Shaolin Temple, seriously. He clicked his tongue in disapproval as he watched them. They're just practicing basic breathing techniques, huh? I wonder how many of them could be worth training internal energy. He noticed the disciples sweating and trembling, some even yawning in exhaustion. He grimaced, completely unamused. Gosh, their hands and legs are trembling. I guess their bodies must be really sore. He turned around, placing his hands behind his back. What's the use of forcefully doing that when their hearts aren't ready? Tusk. He continued his stroll through the sect grounds, his long robe dragging slightly in the dirt. He stopped in front of the third-class disciples' residence, hoping for a better sight. An instructor was barking orders at a group of disciples. "Focus, the first move, ha!" The Grand Elder watched with a critical eye. "That's Celestial Dissension and Lunar Meteor Pursuit Sword Technique." He narrowed his eyes. "Well, those are common sword techniques of the Manhwa sect, but those aren't at the level of what the third-class disciples should be learning." He stroked his mustache thoughtfully. Shouldn't they be learning Thunder Sword Technique and the 12 falling blossoms scatter instead? Suddenly, the instructor shouted, "Sword formation!" The disciples quickly raised their swords in unison. They moved swiftly, their blades slicing through the air as they formed a complex pattern. The Grand Elder gasped, his eye wide with disbelief. "The 7-star sword formation? What?" He looked completely bewildered. Who the hell came up with this training? How could this be a part of the training? His shock quickly melted into fierce anger. They want them to fight others in a group as compared to growing them to be strong individually. They must be crazy. The instructor continued to berate the struggling students. "Jangjin, how can the person leading the move be you? Hey, Pyong, how can you still not know where you're supposed to be? Will you guys only get a grip after being scolded? Oh, Sang, be attentive. Is that where you are supposed to be?" The Grand Elder glared at the pathetic display. "Why? Don't I feel any vigor or bloodlust in this sword formation?" The instructor clutched his fist, screaming, "Don't swing your sword. Hong Yu, make sure to get into the sword formation first before using the Lunar Meteor Pursuit Sword Technique. The sword formation comes before the sword technique." The Grand Elder's jaw dropped. He was absolutely appalled. He's giving up on attacking. Does he want to use the sword formation only for defense? The instructor kept yelling in the background. The Grand Elder scoffed in utter disgust. I can't believe he is saying such bullshit even though he is experienced in the outside world. He spun around sharply, his long black hair whipping through the air. He couldn't bear to watch another second. His footsteps were heavy and filled with disappointment as he hiked up a steep, rocky trail, leaving the sect grounds behind. He eventually reached a high cliff overlooking the entire Manhwa sect. The wind howled past him, tugging at his clothes. He gazed silently at the sprawling courtyards and tiled roofs far below. A melancholic breeze swept past. What happened to the swordsmen who have fought for their lives in the past? He pondered aloud. Where have the Manhwa sect's swordsmen I remember disappeared to? He let out a long, heavy sigh. The difference between the past and the present is way too stark. He tilted his head back, looking up at the vast blue sky. Han-ho, are you watching this from the heavens? Your Manhwa sect has fallen so much. A dark, menacing grin slowly spread across his face. You're upset, aren't you, that I'm using your name like this, but I want you to be more frustrated and upset. Standing tall against the mountain winds, he made his declaration to the heavens. Because it won't be you. I'll be the one to make Manhwa sect great again. The Grand Elder walked calmly down a secluded mountain path. Suddenly, a loud clattering noise broke the silence, making him pause and look over his shoulder. He hummed, Curious, he stepped off the path, quietly parting the tall grass with a soft rustle to peek through. Before him, a young disciple violently face-planted into the dirt with a heavy thud. The youth cried out, ouch. The Grand Elder observed him from the bushes. He thought to himself, who is that? A first-class disciple. As the boy knelt in the dirt panting heavily, the Grand Elder quickly realized the truth. He thought, he is not a first-class disciple. There aren't any plum blossoms embroidery on his clothes. Pushing himself back up, the boy took a low, wide stance. He shouted with determination, all right once more. The young man threw a quick punch that cut through the air with a sharp swoosh. The elder watched closely, thinking, he doesn't even have a sword. Is he training in fist techniques? Falling back into his stance, the boy let out a sharp cry, ha. He lunged forward again, throwing a fierce punch with an aggressive exhale. The Grand Elder's eyes widened in slight surprise. He thought, ho, that's not bad. But right in the middle of the motion, the boy's foot shifted awkwardly, squeaking against the ground. Realization dawned on the boy's sweaty face just a second too late. The Grand Elder recognized the stance immediately. He thought, isn't that Shadowless punch? The boy flailed wildly, throwing the punch without any balance. The elder frowned, thinking, but why is he using something street thugs use? His ankle suddenly twisted with a sickening crunch. The boy groaned, arg. He collapsed back onto the ground with a painful thud, grinding his teeth in frustration. The Grand Elder clicked his tongue in disapproval. He thought, how could he possibly use his techniques correctly when his feet aren't coordinating with his next move? The boy struggled to push himself up, trembling slightly. He groaned, why isn't it working? Stepping out of the grass, the Grand Elder finally spoke up. You're that way because you are trying something stupid from the start. The boy whipped around, eyes wide in shock. He yelled, what? Recognizing the old man, panic instantly set in. He exclaimed, wait, Grand Elder. The elder casually waved off the formalities with his hand. Forget the greetings. What are you doing here? Sweating profusely, the boy nervously twiddled his fingers. He stuttered, sorry, The Grand Elder smiled slightly, trying to appear gentle. You looked like you were doing something interesting. Instantly, the boy's face lit up with pure joy. He asked, really? Clapping his hands together eagerly, the boy beamed. Didn't it look amazing, Grand Elder? The elder nodded slowly. It looked like a pretty amazing attempt. Pumping his fists, the boy cheered. I knew it. Even you think something amazing would come out of this, right? The Grand Elder stared at him dead in the eyes and bluntly replied, no. Completely deflated, the boy scratched the back of his head with an awkward chuckle. Ha 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 ha. The Grand Elder questioned him. The Shadowless punch is usually used with the right hand. Why did you use your left for it? The boy tilted his head in total confusion. Pardon, are you talking about the Plum Blossom Scatter Punch? The elder looked stunned. Oh, that was the Plum Blossom Scatter Punch. Trying to save face, the Grand Elder nodded sagely. I thought it had some extraordinary varying movements. It makes sense if that was the Plum Blossom Scatter Punch. The boy gave him a flat look. What? The Plum Blossom Scatter Punch is one of your ultimate techniques, though, the elder flinched. Coughing loudly to hide his embarrassment, the elder stuttered out an excuse. It's because it looks so ridiculous, I couldn't recognize it. The boy bowed his head, stuttering apologetically. My apologies, Grand Elder. It's because I'm lacking in skills. The elder quickly changed the subject. Forget about that. What was that ridiculous, bizarre thing that you were doing? Scratching his head again, the boy explained. I'm more interested in fist and palm techniques than sword techniques. I like the Plum Blossom Scatter Punch and Shadowless Punch best among all the techniques. He continued, his eyes shining with passion. The Plum Blossom Scatter Punch is flashy because of the varying movements, so it's cool. The Shadowless Punch feels like a martial art that a seclusive martial master would use. It's concise and has a manly vibe to it. The Grand Elder lost his temper, veins popping on his forehead. He yelled, so why were you doing that just now? Why is a young man like you so frustrating to talk to? Shrinking back, the boy nervously stuttered. That's because I think using both the Plum Blossom Scatter Punch and Shadowless Punch together would look great. The elder stared blankly. What? Furious, the elder raised a trembling hand as if to strike him. He stuttered in pure rage. "You brat!" The boy quickly covered his head to block the blow. The elder lowered his hand, exasperated. "Why are you acting like that? Did someone beat you? Why are you guarding yourself?" Still shielding his head, the boy stuttered, "My apologies." The elder gritted his teeth and roared, "Talk to me after you've put your arms down." He screamed right in the boy's face, stuttering, "Put it down." The terrified youth stuttered back, "Yes, Grand Elder." Calming down slightly, the elder sighed. "Brat, you ought to be focusing on one martial art right now, yet you're doing such unnecessary things. Do you think you're the sword god?" The boy shook his head frantically. "Ah, how could I dare think of that? That's not the case." The elder gestured wildly with his hands. "Brat, just train in either the Plum Blossom Scatter Punch or the Shadowless Punch. Only then will you be able to master at least one." But the boy stubbornly argued, "But if I manage to use both together, I think a really perfect fist technique could be birthed. I mean it." The elder looked at him as if he was completely hopeless. "You're so pathetic, seriously. How can you use both of them together when they are such different techniques?" Still defiant, the boy muttered, "That's because I need to train tirelessly until my body gets used to it." The elder screamed, "I already told you that wouldn't work." Looking deeply heartbroken, the boy whispered, "I really like these two techniques." Throwing a punch into his open palm out of sheer frustration, the elder yelled, How can you use both techniques at once when they are fundamentally different? It's because of your ridiculous Plum Blossom Scatter Punch footwork that your Shadowless Punch is getting messed up." The boy's eyes widened and he smacked his hands together. "Oh, that's right. Why didn't I notice it, the footwork?" The elder glared at him, a dark aura radiating from his body. "You still haven't got your head on straight? Didn't I tell you that wouldn't work? The movements of the techniques cut each other off. They need to continue from other movements in order to have a continuous attack." Suddenly, the elder paused mid-sentence. An unexpected realization struck him like lightning. Sensing the sudden silence, the boy nervously called out, "Grand Elder." The elder stared at him intently and simply said, "Train hard." Utterly confused, the boy asked, "What?" The elder turned to leave, his robes flowing behind him, but then he paused and glanced back. "Oh, right, what's your name?" Still dazed, the boy answered, "I'm Jang Pyong, a second-class disciple." The elder pointed a finger right at him. "I won't forget your name, Jang Pyong." A wave of dread washed over Jang Pyong. He paled, thinking, "Can't you just forget my name instead?" Sometime later, at the Azure Academy, the Grand Elder sat cross-legged in the courtyard, facing a large group of young, murmuring disciples. The students whispered excitedly among themselves, "It's been a while since Grand Elder came. He says he will be teaching us something interesting." "What, really? What is he teaching?" Standing up slowly, the elder picked up a stick and began dragging it through the dirt. He etched a deep, sharp line into the ground, followed by a smooth, sweeping curve. The stick made soft, scratching sounds as he completed the intricate pattern. The young disciples leaned in, buzzing with curiosity. "What's that? Oh, what's he doing?" Suddenly, footsteps approached the courtyard gate. The students turned, whispering, "What could that be?" A man walked in, trailing a familiar face behind him. The man thought, "I don't know why he brought me here, and what's with that kid?" Jang Pyong walked alongside Master Uncle Ban. The older man asked, "Jang Pyong?" Jang Pyong replied nervously, "Yes, Master Uncle Ban." Master Uncle Ban corrected him gently. "We came in around the same time. You should be calling me senior brother instead." Jang Pyong awkwardly scratched his head. "It's because I'm still a second-class disciple." With a sad smile, Master Uncle Ban replied, "Even though that's what the sect decided, no one thinks of you that way." Their conversation was cut short by a massive chorus of awe from the students. "Whoa!" Both of them jumped in surprise. The Grand Elder had drawn a massive, intricate emblem of a bird soaring upward, its wings resembling blossoming petals. Wiping the sweat from his brow, the elder let out a satisfied breath. "All right, I'm done." Master Uncle Ban stared in utter disbelief. "What is that?" he asked while the kids cheered around him. The Grand Elder walked to the base of his drawing. "Look carefully, this is the start point." He planted his boots firmly into the dirt, readying his stance. With a sudden burst of power, he leapt lightly into the air. He dashed gracefully, his movements fluid as he demonstrated an evasive and rapid footwork technique. He landed nimbly, his boots tapping softly against wooden training poles. The young disciples frowned in disappointment. "What? Come on, that's boring." The elder glanced back with a sly, confident smirk. "Take a closer look. If you do it well, this is what it'll look like." He returned to the base of the emblem, standing perfectly still. He shifted his weight, digging his heels deep into the earth. Master Uncle Ban and Jang Pyong watched intently. Jang Pyong gasped in amazement. "Oh." In the blink of an eye, the Grand Elder exploded forward. He moved so incredibly fast that he left a trail of glowing afterimages, his blue robes billowing like a storm as he tore across the courtyard. He came to a halt, sliding smoothly across the dirt. Standing tall with his hands clasped behind his back, he looked over his shoulder with an undeniable aura of mastery. "Did you see that?" The tall master stood with his hands clasped behind his back, facing a large group of wide-eyed Azure Academy students. Suddenly, the kids erupted into thunderous cheers, throwing their arms up and clapping with pure joy. The master stroked his beard thoughtfully. He declared, "Let's see, all right," while scanning the eager crowd. He pointed straight at a surprised boy with a spiky ponytail, asking, "What's your name?" The boy puffed out his chest and answered loudly, "I am Hyun-seung, the most senior among the Azure Academy students." The master gestured to the intricate markings on the ground behind him, asking, "You see that, right?" Hyun-seung nodded, replying, "Yes." Drawn into the dirt was an elaborate pattern of curving lines and small wooden pegs, resembling a majestic bird in flight. The master placed a heavy hand on the boy's shoulder. "You just need to follow those footprints. Since you are the most senior here, you must do a great job, okay?" Hyun-seung's face lit up with a determined, proud smile. Immediately, chaos ensued as the kids sprinted forward. One shouted, "I want to try it first," while the others swarmed, yelling, "Me too," and "No, I want to try it first." The master turned to the two bewildered onlookers, the elder and the young disciple. He asked smugly, "How was that?" The elder and the young disciple exchanged confused glances. They asked in unison, "What about?" The master raised an eyebrow, prompting, "But..." The elder sweated nervously, analyzing the technique. "I think there is something in the breathing within the technique. I am unable to know what that is because I am dull." The master burst into a hearty laugh, affectionately slapping the elder's arm. "No, you have got pretty good eyes." The young disciple's jaw dropped. "The 7 stars dazzling stride?" he exclaimed. The 7 stars dazzling stride is an advanced ultimate technique that comprises variation and speed, though, he realized with a shock. That is the same thing. The master swiftly chopped the young disciple on the head with a sharp thwack. "Argue, brat," he scolded. The disciple cried, "Ouch," while clutching his throbbing skull. The master grabbed the boy's head with both hands, squishing his cheeks. "Think before you speak. That is the 64 power techniques." A large, confused question mark seemed to hover over the elder and the young disciples' heads. The boy asked, "What?" as he rubbed his sore scalp. The master threw his head back, a dark aura radiating from him as he laughed maniacally. "Ahaha, it was worth it being stuck in the library." Regaining his composure, he stood tall with his hands on his hips. "The 64 power techniques is an energy circulation punch." The young disciple blinked in surprise, repeating, "An energy circulation punch?" The elder rubbed his chin, piecing it together. "Energy circulation punch. That means while moving your body, you would gather strength and internal energy. But is not that a technique that has died out?" The master's expression grew serious. "Yeah, while it trains both the internal energy and outer strength, it got forgotten because it did not stand out." The elder frowned slightly, clearly puzzled. "We have a lot of excellent basic techniques. Why are you showing us an energy circulation punch?" The master scoffed, looking down his nose. "Oh, things like the surging cultivation technique, absorption breathing technique, and deep purification technique, Manhwa sect's advanced cultivation techniques." He shot them a sharp glare, asking, "When will you improve at that rate?" Both the elder and the young disciple recoiled in sheer shock. They yelled, "What?" The master watched the children running around the courtyard. He mocked, "By training for 40 years. A flash of imaginary lightning struck behind the elder as realization and offense hit him hard. The young disciple observed the elder's twitching face, thinking nervously, "It seems the grand elder has struck a nerve." The master leaned in close to the elder. 100 years ago, there were 5 martial masters that ruled the world. Demon Whale, the leader of the unorthodox that reached the peak of unorthodox martial arts. The Blade Demon who roamed the world alone. The Black Emperor who looked down on the world from his heavenly mountain's myriad demon castle. And the young disciple tilted his head, calculating. "There is only 4, including you. Who is the last person?" The master's eyes narrowed dangerously as he replied, "That is none of your business." The master picked his nose nonchalantly and sighed. "I do not think I should say that myself," leaving the boy utterly confused. The master continued. "The Blade Demon got his hands on the 12 heaven-destroying blade techniques and became a top martial master. And the Black Emperor got his hands on the dark demonic scriptures, learned the heavenly demon energy arts, and became the demonic cult leader by defeating the legitimate successor." The master's gaze sharpened with a fiery glow in his eyes. "While the events do not look related to each other, the two of them have something in common." The elder and the young disciple listened intently, hanging on his every word in complete silence. He revealed, up until the point when they obtained what changed their life, the only energy cultivation technique they learned was the energy circulation fist. The young disciple's eyes widened in realization, while the elder gasped, "Ah, such a thing happened." The young disciple said in disbelief, "To think that the strongest people of the Murim started not with ultimate energy cultivation techniques, but with energy circulation fist." The elder furrowed his brow, deeply conflicted. "Grand elder, but those 2 skills." The master nodded slowly. One of them is of the Orthodox sect, and the other is a demonic martial master that learned demonic arts. You are curious about how they reached their level even though they both learned martial arts totally different fundamentally, right? The elder and the disciple nodded eagerly in agreement. As the kids laughed and played on the ground patterns in the background, the master explained, the energy circulation fist. He continued, but the origin of the energy circulation fist is the same. The master detailed, it is because it uses one's body and breathing. It trains both the internal and external parts of their body evenly. Unlike energy cultivation techniques where one needs to choose between orthodox and demonic, the energy circulation fist remains neutral. The elder stroked his beard thoughtfully, absorbing the profound insight, while the disciple scratched his head. An image of a glowing, powerful internal energy figure appeared behind the master. And the 64 power techniques is an extraordinary energy circulation fist. Upon completion, take 8 breaths and perform the great heavenly circulation. The elder and the young disciple were completely flabbergasted. The disciple stuttered, the great heavenly circulation. The master chuckled, watching the children happily navigating the drawn obstacles. Ho ho, they sure are having fun. The disciple sweated nervously. Although it is not that I do not trust your words, how could such young children understand such a difficult martial art? The master smiled knowingly. They are already doing a great job, though. The young disciple tilted his head, asking, what? The elder gasped softly, connecting the dots. The 7 dazzling stride would replace the 64 movements within the 64 power techniques, huh? The master pointed enthusiastically. That is right. The 7 stars dazzling stride uses the 8 trigrams as a base and hides 64 variations within it. The elder stared at the complex drawing in the dirt. And based on the lines and images you have drawn on the ground, the breathing would change with each movement due to the obstacles, a total of 64 breaths. The young disciple was absolutely mesmerized, whispering, amazing! The elder let out an impressed breath, oh. Later, the master stood before a massive crowd of murmuring students at the Success Palace, Manhwa sect's third-class disciples' residence. He scanned the disciplined ranks with a stern expression, asking, who is the most senior disciple here? A serious-looking young man stepped forward from the formation. He declared firmly, I am Yang Soho. Yang Soho stood tall, a faint red aura emanating from him, showcasing his quiet intensity. The master's sharp eyes analyzed him closely. He thought, for such a young kid, he has got a blade-like presence all over him. He is good. The master beckoned the boy with his finger. Follow me? Yang Soho bowed slightly and replied, yes, Grand Elder. He followed the master away from the courtyard, leaving the rest of the students waiting in absolute silence. The elder and the young disciple whispered among themselves. The elder asked, is he intending to install something for training again? The disciple replied with a grin, I wonder what he will demonstrate this time. Off to the side, the master crouched down with Yang Soho, quietly drawing something invisible in the air and whispering secret instructions to the attentive student. After a brief moment, the master stood up. Do you understand? He asked. Yang Soho bowed respectfully, a confident smile on his face. The master returned to the crowd, presenting Yang Soho. All right, from now on, he will be teaching you a new sword technique that you will be practicing. The elder and the young disciple practically jumped out of their skin. They yelled in shock, Yang Soho is the one who is teaching, while the rest of the students erupted into panicked shouts. The master casually picked at his ear, simply replying, yes. He crossed his arms proudly. I have already taught it to him. The young disciple stepped forward, baffled. When did you do that? Did you teach him secretly last night? The master rolled his eyes. When else? I just taught it to him now. The young disciple shouted, what? Yang Soho stood stoically as the elder stared in utter disbelief. The elder thought, since when did he teach him? No way. A brief memory flashed in their minds of the incredibly short, shadowy conversation the master and student just had kneeling together. The elder gripped his own face, trembling. He muttered, no, that is impossible. The young disciple pointed accusingly at the master with a sharp thrust of his hand. It cannot be that you taught him when you brought him aside to talk to him while drawing on the ground. The master raised a casual brow, answering smoothly, that was it though. The elder's eyes shot open wide in sheer panic. He yelled, wait, but that is impossible. The master smirked, stepping closer to the hyperventilating elder. Are you unable to believe I could teach him a new sword technique just by talking to him for a little bit? Ho ho. The elder flinched, bowing his head nervously. He shouted, my apologies. The master patted the elder's shoulder reassuringly. The elder sweated profusely, muttering, yes, no matter how hard I think about it, how could it be possible to teach a sword technique that quickly? That is impossible. The master turned his sharp gaze toward the courtyard. Then you should try to test him. The elder jolted in shock. Alarmed by the sudden challenge, the elder shouted, Grand Elder. The master simply rested a hand heavily on Yang Soho's shoulder. It is simple, is not it? You just need to check who is right here, you or me. He looked down at Yang Soho. You have not forgotten what I told you just now, right? Once you start, you must give it your all from the very first move. Yang Soho nodded deeply. The master's eyes glowed with fierce, terrifying anticipation. The elder stepped onto the stone courtyard, taking a defensive stance. The air crackled with intense tension as Yang Soho faced him, a swift, sharp aura swirling around them as they prepared to clash. A peaceful morning dawned over the majestic pavilions of the Manhwa sect, sunlight filtering gently through the clouds. Outside the Growth Palace, the residence of the second-class disciples, a large crowd gathered, murmuring excitedly among themselves. The hushed whispers echoed along the high walls as the disciples completely abandoned their morning routines. First-class disciple Yang Yondeok marched over, his face stern. He demanded, "What are you guys doing? Do you not know it will be training time soon? Run over." The disciples flinched in fear, while Joe Segel nervously stammered, "Master Uncle, that is." Yondeok snapped loudly, "Joe Segel." Startled, Segel stood at strict attention, replying, "Yes, Master Uncle." Leaning in menacingly close, Yondeok growled, "You tell me what the hell is going on." Sweating bullets, Segel explained, "We were on our way to the Success Palace." Yondeok raised an eyebrow, asking, "The Success Palace? Why are you going there at this time?" "We heard that the Grand Elder is at the Success Palace and is personally teaching martial arts," Segel revealed. Yondeok's jaw dropped in disbelief as he exclaimed, "What? The Grand Elder is teaching personally?" Heavy footsteps approached, accompanied by an authoritative voice asking, "Does that make sense?" A group of esteemed elders strode forward, their presence alone commanding immediate respect from everyone present. The disciples immediately dropped into deep bows, shouting in unison, "We pay our respects to the elders." Sun Go, the first elder of the Manhwa sect, asked with interest, "Did you say the Grand Elder is teaching personally?" Segel hastily replied, "Yes, Elder." A bright smile spread across Sun Go's face as he cheered. "He is teaching them personally. Oh, the Grand Elder, what a celebratory moment this is." Beside him, Southern Heavenly Temple leader Bang Doyu gently nudged him, saying, "Senior brother, let us get going. I am curious as to what the Grand Elder is teaching." As the elders hurried off, Segel called out helplessly, "Master Uncle, what about us?" Yondeok paused, utterly distracted by the news. Looking over his shoulder with an eager grin, Yondeok chuckled, "Come along quickly, you guys." Meanwhile, at the Success Palace, a fierce duel was already underway. The older disciple, Woon San, lunged forward with a sharp swoosh. He swung his sword with incredible speed and power, intent on crushing his young opponent. But his heavy blade was instantly met with a sharp clack, completely halted in midair. Woon San gritted his teeth, his mind reeling as he thought, just how? It should have been deflected, though. He struck again, the metallic clang echoing loudly across the courtyard as he pushed with all his might. With a furious shout, he unleashed a barrage of sharp, sweeping slashes. The younger disciple effortlessly slid backward with a soft, scraping sound, his feet kicking up a cloud of dust as he evaded. The kid's eyes locked onto his opponent, burning with a quiet, fierce intensity. Without a moment's hesitation, he countered, his sword slicing downward with a ferocious howl. The courtyard erupted into a dizzying flurry of attacks, sparks flying as their blades clashed repeatedly in a whirlwind of motion. Woon San was forcefully pushed back, his boots skidding harshly against the dirt floor. Panting heavily, Woon San finally realized the trick, thinking, "I see, that elasticity." His eyes widened in intense focus, desperate to keep up with the overwhelming pace. Suddenly, the boy vanished in a blur of motion. Woon San panicked, shouting, "Where did he go?" A shadow fell over him. Woon San looked up, his pupils shrinking in sheer shock. The kid was airborne, completely blocking out the sun as he prepared to deliver a devastating downward strike. Woon San could only stare at the incoming blade, utterly paralyzed by the flawless execution. Watching from the sidelines, First Elder Sun Go gasped in surprise, exclaiming, "Oh." Bang Doyu analyzed the rapid sequence of moves, noting, starting with Drizzle Sword Technique's Burst Strike, then he uses Lunar Meteor Pursuit Sword Technique's Shattering Meteor, and finally, the Soul-Stealing Meteor. Northern Heavenly Temple leader Di Zhonghe stroked his beard nervously, adding, "After that, he used Seven Blossom Sword Technique's Soaring Flower Ricochet, and that is." Jade Cavern Palace's Master Seo Rim stuttered in pure awe. Three Lunar Shadow Stances' Hidden Lunar Execution. Suddenly, one of the elders noticed a shift in the fight, stuttering in alarm, "Wait, that is." With a deafening roar, Woon San unleashed a massive, swirling wave of energy from his blade. He brought the sword down with terrifying force, tearing through the air. The explosive impact sent the kid flying backward, skidding violently across the stone tiles. Sun Go watched with deep concern, questioning, "Earth Dragons, 9 revolving slash." Another elder widened his eyes in horror, stuttering, "Is that the crushing slash, a blade technique used in the military?" As Woon San advanced aggressively, Sun Go muttered, "That is a martial art commonly used in the outside world, but more importantly." He continued, utterly baffled, "What? Who is that kid?" His swordsmanship is pretty good. I know Woon-san is probably going easy on him, but to think he would be pushed back like this." The elders watched as the blades clashed once more. Sun Go thought aloud, "Is it because Woon-san's attacks also include some recoil? I guess there is a limit to how much he can take, but that kid's attacks." Bang Doyu cut him off, his gaze sharp. "Stop talking and look at that child's sword movements carefully." The sheer weight of the crushing slash pressed down heavily on the boy. Yet with a graceful flick of his wrist, the kid parried the heavy blow seamlessly. Someone from the crowd whispered, "Amazing." Woon-san kept swinging, frustration mounting. An elder noted, "He is simply reacting to the situation. He cannot win by just reacting." Woon-san gripped his hilt so tightly, his knuckles turned white. A tempest of sharp wind gathered around his sword, humming with dangerous, swirling power. With a mighty shout, Woon-san unleashed a vicious horizontal sweep. The blade found its mark, slicing cleanly across the boy's shoulder with a sharp splash of blood. Bleeding and out of breath, the kid gritted his teeth amidst the settling dust. He thought frantically, "I need to do something. What do I need here?" A spark of realization flashed in his eyes as he remembered a crucial piece of advice, thinking, "If you do not know what to do." His master's voice echoed in his mind, "Go in rounds, keep going in rounds. You will know what to do as long as you hang in there." The boy's gaze hardened, radiating renewed determination as he declared, "All right." He stomped the ground, shattering the stone beneath him, and launched himself forward with explosive speed. Woon-san flinched, visibly taken aback by the sudden, reckless charge. The kid swung upwards with terrifying momentum, kicking up a massive boulder in his wake. Woon-san narrowed his eyes, bracing himself firmly behind the flying debris. He sliced through the rock with ease, immediately countering the kid's strike. Their swords met with a thunderous impact, cracking the ground beneath their feet and sending shockwaves outward. What followed was a dizzying exchange of blows, both fighters pushing themselves to the absolute limit. Sparks rained down like fireworks as steel met steel in a relentless high-speed rhythm. They moved like dark silhouettes, a chaotic whirlwind of slashes and parries. Even in midair, they refused to back down, matching each other blow for heavy blow. Sweat poured down Woon-san's face as he struggled to keep up. He thought frantically, "His attacks are getting faster." The watching disciples were losing their minds, murmuring, "What? They are fighting on par. He is fighting on par with Master Uncle Woon-san. That is absurd." The elders shared the exact same sentiment, their jaws unhinged in disbelief as they muttered, "How could this be?" Watching from the sidelines, Chung Mayung clenched his fist, a proud, slightly manic grin on his face. He cheered, "That is right, that is how you do it. He is doing much better than I thought. He is a real treasure." A brilliant, suffocating blue aura of internal energy suddenly erupted around Woon-san. Chung Mayung's eyes widened in sheer outrage as he shouted, "What?" Grabbing the nearest disciple, Chung Mayung roared furiously, "That bastard! I said no internal energy. He is using internal energy." A first-class disciple using internal energy. He threw his hands up in absolute disgust, finishing his rant against a third-class disciple. Ignoring the rules entirely, Woon-san roared, bringing down his glowing, overpowered blade. The crowd screamed in sheer panic, yelling, "What? He is using sword energy." The terrifying strike descended, tearing through the air with a deafening screech. The boy raised his blade to block, but the overwhelming force completely shattered his defensive stance. With a pained grunt, he was violently blown back by the crushing pressure. But right as he seemed defeated, a vivid purple light flared intensely in the kid's eyes. He thrust his open hand forward, completely changing his posture, and shouted, "Now is the time." Woon-san relentlessly swung again with a heavy grunt, determined to finish the fight. The heavy blade sliced through the air, creating a massive, sweeping shockwave. Yet with uncanny grace, the boy simply reached out his open hand, perfectly intercepting the devastating attack. The elders were practically pulling their hair out in shock, yelling, "How is that possible? Just how? How did he do that?" Woon-san stopped, panting heavily. He stared at the kid, who stood completely unfazed despite the bleeding cut on his face. The two warriors locked eyes, an intense, suffocating tension filling the courtyard. Woon-san tightened his grip on his sword with a firm squeeze, preparing for one final clash. They both exploded forward simultaneously, moving faster than the eye could track. Leaping high into the air, they brought their swords down with everything they had. But just before the blades collided, a hand smoothly caught both weapons, halting their momentum entirely with a sharp clack. As the dust settled, Chung Mayung stood casually between them, effortlessly holding both of their swords back with his bare hands, leaving the entire courtyard in stunned silence. The courtyard shook with a thunderous explosion as the two swordsmen clashed in a blur of motion, sending a massive shockwave ripping through the air. With a soft tap, he effortlessly deflected the advancing blade. "You should stop here as well," he advised calmly. The exhausted disciples lowered their weapons, panting heavily. They stared in bewildered shock, simultaneously blurting out, "Huh." The Grand Elder let out a hearty laugh, visibly impressed. "You did great, considering it is your first time using the technique," he praised. Dropping his head in a deep, respectful bow, the young man apologized to the Grand Elder for his lack of skill. The Grand Elder placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "The more you think about it, the more mysteries of the sword you will understand. Do not forget today's sparring." He explained that compared to 1,000 days of regular training, the profound lessons learned in today's single sparring session had improved his skills by several years. The boy bowed deeply once more, promising to bear the lesson in mind. The Grand Elder nodded in approval, softly dismissing him. The spectators erupted into wild cheers. Disciples threw their fists into the air, screaming with excitement at the spectacular display of swordsmanship. Turning his attention to the defeated elder, the Grand Elder scowled and clicked his tongue in deep disapproval. "Why did you behave so unseemly?" he demanded. "Did you want to win against a kid so much?" the Grand Elder mocked, his eyes narrowing in judgment. "It seems you are much more narrow-minded than you appear." The humiliated man stood frozen in silence. The Grand Elder pressed on, asking if he was still unwilling to admit his loss. Unable to bear the sheer weight of his embarrassment, the defeated elder dropped heavily to his knees, begging the Grand Elder for punishment. The Grand Elder casually swatted the air, utterly dismissing the melodramatic apology. "Forget it, you brat," he sighed. Annoyed by the relentless cheering of the crowd, the Grand Elder dug a finger into his ear. "You are all so noisy. I am busy. Lead the way to the Growth Palace," he commanded. The disciples pumped their fists with explosive enthusiasm, eagerly shouting that they would wait for his orders. The sheer volume of their fanatical screaming forced the Grand Elder to plug both ears. He winced, wondering what on earth was wrong with these kids. They stared at him with starry eyes, swearing to learn with burning passion. The Grand Elder could only stare back, thoroughly creeped out. A few days later, in a quiet, warmly lit room, two senior elders sat across from each other over steaming cups of tea. The white-haired elder took a slow sip from his cup, casually mentioning that he heard his companion had been quite busy. The mustached elder flailed his hands defensively, sweating bullets as he loudly insisted he was not the only one drowning in work. Chuckling at the reaction, the white-haired elder brought up the rumors floating among the children, asking how the new elder was holding up. The response was grim. He had not stepped out of his residence once. The white-haired elder lowered his cup, letting out a long, heavy sigh. A dry, knowing chuckle escaped his lips, as he guessed the defeated master must be incredibly shocked by his recent loss. The mustached elder nodded emphatically. He admitted that while Woon San's defeat was somewhat understandable, it was mind-boggling that the new elder suffered the exact same fate. He noted that in terms of pure martial prowess, the man was second only to the sect leader. As the tranquil palace master, losing to young disciples was an unfathomable blow to his pride. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he added that the master was fiercely competitive, especially considering he was turning 61 in just 2 days. He suspected the proud man simply could not admit reality, especially since it had barely been any time since the children learned the Grand Elder's new technique. He leaned forward, questioning if such an absurdly rapid growth in skill was even realistically possible. Both men laughed in sheer disbelief, marveling at how the Grand Elder managed to invent such a devastating technique by merely combining various movements from other martial arts. Staring out the window with a hardened gaze, the mustached elder stated that this incident was far bigger than what had happened with Woon San. He vividly recalled the impossible sight of a second-class and third-class disciple, completely overwhelming a seasoned elder using nothing but basic sword techniques. He sighed deeply, rubbing his temples as he tried to process how the top martial masters of the Manhwa sect were pushed back over 10 steps by mere children. The mustached elder leaned over the table, intensely curious as to what profound principles could possibly be hidden within the Grand Elder's teachings. The white-haired elder took another calm sip of his tea, noting that while the moves appeared basic, they contained an impossibly great strength behind them. Unable to contain his frustration, the mustached elder slammed his hands onto the table, demanding to know how such power was possible from moves they already knew. The white-haired elder gently blew on his tea, an aura of serene reverence around him. "This is why the Grand Elder is truly incredible," he explained softly. He clarified that the true miracle was drawing out amazing power using only the most fundamental stances, rather than relying on advanced, flashy techniques. At first, he thought the Grand Elder had invented a new mystic art, but he realized the genius simply found the ultimate principle of proficiency within familiar movements and passed that enlightenment down. The mustached elder crossed his arms, his skepticism flaring up again. He wondered aloud if relying on basic coincidences and situational reactions would prove too shallow at higher levels of combat. The white-haired elder countered by recalling a brief instant during the spar between Soho and Woon San, where a single strike perfectly mirrored an advanced technique. The mustached elder violently spat his tea across the room in a mist of shock, hacking and coughing, as he demanded to know if his friend had really seen what he claimed. Wiping his mouth with a trembling hand, he stared in utter disbelief. "The air-burst sword?" he gasped. "How could a third-class disciple achieve a level that even the elders have not reached?" The white-haired elder chuckled warmly, highly amused by his companion's sheer panic, and admitted he had been just as surprised. The mustached elder threw his hands up in the air, his eyes wide with frantic denial as he stammered, asking how that was even possible. Reflected in the puddle of spilled tea, the white-haired elder's calm expression remained unbothered. He calmly repeated that while it looked identical, it was not the actual air-burst sword technique. The mustached elder slammed his fist onto the table with a loud crack, arguing that even mimicking something similar to the air-burst sword was an absurd achievement. He groaned in utter exasperation, pointing out that Soho only had 10 years of martial experience, practically begging for an explanation of how the boy did it. The white-haired elder slowly shook his head from side to side, confessing that despite a lifetime of training, he could not explain it either. However, he was absolutely certain that the energy behind the Grand Elder's technique was perfectly on par with Woon San's peak attack power. The mustached elder's eyes nearly bulged out of his skull as he realized the attacks were genuinely infused with core energy, something his companion confirmed. Suddenly struck by a terrifying realization, the mustached elder frantically asked what they should even call this miraculous new martial art. The white-haired elder stroked his chin, his brow furrowed in deep thought as he pondered a fittingly grand title. Cut back to the courtyard. The Grand Elder's jaw dropped, his face paling as he exclaimed, "Sword God Martial Arts? What?" A bright-eyed disciple nodded earnestly, confirming that was the glorious name everyone had agreed upon for the technique he taught them. The Grand Elder's face contorted into a furious, shadowed snarl. He gritted his teeth, silently cursing the heavens that some long-dead hero was stealing the credit for his hard work. He let out a long, soul-crushing sigh, looking up at the sky in sheer, exhausted defeat. He whispered to himself, wondering why they had to use the word sword god of all things. The disciple tilted his head, innocently explaining that since the Grand Elder taught them, the sect naturally wanted to honor him by putting his nickname in the title. A dark, terrifying aura erupted from the Grand Elder. In his mind, he furiously screamed that he, the slaughterer demon monarch, made the technique, angrily debating if he should rename it the God-Killer Martial Arts. Completely oblivious to his master's terrifying internal monologue, the disciple blinked in confusion and asked what was wrong. Throwing his arms up in exasperation, the Grand Elder snapped, "Ah, whatever," and swiftly turned to storm off. He marched away with heavy, irritated steps, eager to escape the suffocating praise of the younger generation. But the cheerful disciple shadowed his every step. The Grand Elder shot him a sideways glare, demanding to know why he was still following him. The Grand Elder's brow twitched with mounting annoyance. He barked at the brat to stop laughing, insisting he had absolutely no intention of getting attached to him. Ignoring the warning entirely, the boy sidled up close, practically vibrating with excitement as he playfully cheered for the Grand Elder. The Grand Elder vigorously waved his hands, trying to shoo the boy away like a pesky insect, ordering him to go back and focus on his training. With a bright, shameless grin, the young boy boldly admitted he actually had a favor to ask. The Grand Elder narrowed his eyes suspiciously. Clapping his hands together in a sharp bow, the boy excitedly begged the Grand Elder to bestow a personalized martial art upon him as well. The Grand Elder stopped dead in his tracks. His expression went completely flat as a single drop of sweat rolled down his cheek, flatly uttering, "What?" The boy looked up, his eyes practically sparkling with cartoonish stars. He shamelessly buttered up the Grand Elder, praising him for creating unprecedented techniques by skipping sleep and meals. The Grand Elder awkwardly cleared his throat, puffing out his chest just a fraction as he easily fell for the exaggerated praise. "Unprecedented. Yeah, that is right." Smiling from ear to ear, the boy logically concluded that since the Elder was so great, he should simply invent another one right now. The Grand Elder's jaw hit the floor. The boy excitedly threw a practice jab, suggesting an incredible punch made by combining the Plum Blossom Scatter Punch and the Shadowless Punch. The Grand Elder firmly crossed his arms and huffed proudly, turning his nose up in the air as he definitively declared, "Not a chance, brat." Before he could take another step, a pair of hands desperately clamped onto his boot with a tight grip. The young boy dropped to the floor, clinging to the Grand Elder's leg for dear life. He screamed, begging for just one technique, while the furious Elder tried to shake him off. Refusing to yield, the boy actually bit into the Grand Elder's robes, fiercely vowing that he would never let go until he was taught. The Grand Elder's furious shouts echoed over the sweeping courtyard roofs, screaming at the little rascal to let go, while the boy's persistent wails for a new martial art rang out into the heavens. The young disciple clung tightly to the Grand Elder's leg. The older man tried to shake him off, shouting, "You are so darn persistent, let go." Looking up with pleading eyes, the disciple whined, "Is there really no chance of it, Grand Elder?" The Grand Elder raised a trembling fist in sheer frustration. "You little rascal, seriously, let go now." Unfazed, the disciple's face lit up with grand ambition. "If you make an exclusive fist technique for me, I will give it a name that will last throughout our sect's history and spread its name throughout the world." The Grand Elder scoffed, utterly unimpressed. "Spread its name, my ass." The disciple flashed a confident smirk. "I was not going to say this at first, but I have already thought of a name, Grand Elder." He threw up a proud thumbs up. "Invincible Hanho Fist Technique." The Grand Elder fell completely silent, his expression deadpan and deeply disturbed. Raising his arms to the sky, the disciple laughed loudly. "You are surprised, right? I am on a totally different naming level as compared to the rest. How can your name not be in it?" The older man simply released a heavy, exhausted sigh at the kneeling fool. Leaning in with a cheeky grin, the disciple teased, "Were you touched? Come on, this much is nothing, Grand Elder." A dark shadow cast over the Grand Elder's face. "I already knew the kind of person you were from the start," he muttered. The disciple's eyes sparkled like stars. "As expected of the Grand Elder, you have seen through my true value." Clenching his fist tight, a terrifying aura erupted from the elder. "Yeah, this is who you are, someone whom words cannot get through to." He swung a heavy punch right at the young man's face, roaring that physical punishment would work way better than words. The disciple stammered in sheer panic, asking what the Grand Elder was doing. With a loud scrape, the young man was sent skidding across the courtyard floor. Trembling on the ground, the disciple cried out, "Grand Elder, if you do not like the invincible Hanho Fist technique, I could use the name Hanho Undefeatable Twin Fist." The elder stepped forward ominously, noting that the boy was really asking for it today. A distant, agonizing scream echoed over the mountain peaks as a bird soared through the sky. Sometime later, first-class disciple Song Jaejun walked solemnly through the serene courtyard. In the training grounds, the third-class disciples were throwing synchronized punches, shouting fiercely with every strike. The younger disciples squabbled playfully in line, shoving each other and demanding their turns. Watching them, Song Jaejun thought to himself, Manhwa sect is changing. He gazed up at the towering main hall. All of these changes started from Grand Elder. A heavy sigh escaped him, but why does Grand Elder not call for us? Staring at his own calloused hands, doubt crept into his mind. Does the Grand Elder think that first-class disciples are not qualified to be taught? Suddenly, urgent shouts broke his train of thought. Senior brother, senior brother." A breathless junior rushed up the stone steps. "What is with the ruckus?" Jaejun asked. The junior gasped, "Grand Elder has called for us." High above, the bright blue sky promised a new beginning. The first-class disciples gathered quickly, murmuring in eager anticipation. "Did he really call for us? We are finally going to receive his teachings." Someone pointed toward the hall. "Oh, here he comes." The Grand Elder descended the stairs with an intimidating presence. He crossed his arms, looking over the assembled group with a thoughtful hum. "Is everyone here?" he asked. Jaejun bowed respectfully and confirmed they were. The elder's eyes narrowed. 12 of you? Are these all of the first-class disciples?" He clicked his tongue in stark disappointment. "I cannot believe there are only 12 Plum Blossom swordsmen of the great Manhwa sect. This is such a dire situation." A wave of shame washed over the men. They coughed awkwardly, avoiding his gaze. Shaking his head, the elder said, "Since you do not even have the numbers to deploy the Plum Blossom Sword Formation, I guess you have not even seen the Great Plum Blossom Sword Formation before, not to mention training in it." Jaejun flinched, the harsh truth stinging his pride. The Grand Elder's tone grew deadly serious. "The Plum Blossom Sword Formation is a powerful formation that has not been overcome by others in several centuries." His eyes gleamed with a mix of respect and fury. "I know it very well since I was defeated by it. It is truly powerful, and the Great Plum Blossom Sword Formation even more so." The disciples bowed eagerly as he asked, "You want me to teach you guys, right?" He immediately shook his head, shutting down their hopes. "There are not any new paths or shortcuts for you guys." Confusion rippled through the ranks. "Pardon?" one of them mumbled. Jaejun and the others stared in stunned silence. Tears welled up in Jaejun's eyes as a devastating thought crossed his mind. Has he completely given up on us? The elder turned his back to them. "You guys are the Plum Blossom swordsmen. Do you think you guys are average street swordsmen?" He whipped around, glaring fiercely. "Do not tell me the great Manhwa sect's Plum Blossom swordsmen have given up on the Plum Blossom technique and want to learn a new one." With explosive passion, he roared, "There are not any other paths for you guys. You have to stick with the Plum Blossom sword technique to the very end." The disciples were deeply moved, tears streaming down their faces as they nodded in agreement. Calming down, the elder folded his arms. "Even among the proverbs of the outside world, there are many that have the way of Taoism deeply engraved within them. For example, while the master can open the door, the road to enlightenment depends on the individual." He delivered his next order sharply. As of this moment, you guys will step down from the duties you have been assigned to. The men gasped in shock. He explained, you guys are still young and should be focused on improving your martial arts. How can you be distracted by other stuff? The trivial tasks can just be left to the old and lazy geezers. Song Jae-jun stammered a protest, but the elder furiously cut him off, bellowing, pack up. He pointed toward the treacherous mountain peaks, head to the windless valley. Panic erupted. They stammered in fear, asking why they were being sent to such a dangerous, isolated place deep in the western mountains. Clenching his fist with blazing intensity, the elder commanded, go all out as you train in the mountains. Forget about the sex matters and immerse yourself in training. All replaced their fear. They stammered his title with sheer gratitude, thanking him for believing in them. Jae-jun bowed respectfully. We will get going now. We will all master the plum blossom sword technique and come back. He knelt on the stone floor, asking for one last piece of advice to push them in the right direction. The Grand Elder stood tall, a commanding presence. As I have said just now, there are many good sayings in the outside world. You guys just need to remember 2 of them. He paused, letting his words carry weight. The harder the training, the easier the usage. He held up 2 fingers. The tougher the things you face in training are, the easier you will be able to use them in a fight. His eyes burned with fierce resolve. You should train as if you are fighting someone, even if there is no one. And when you are fighting an enemy, fight it like there are no other people around. Train like your life depends on it. Train until you are confident enough to laugh even in front of a tiger. Jae-jun looked highly inspired, silently repeating the profound words in his heart. With a dismissive wave of his hand, the elder urged them off. Go now. They say you ought to strike the iron while it is hot. Stop dawdling around and depart right away. The men kowtowed deeply, shouting that his kindness was like the heavens to them. Watching them leave, the elder sighed wearily. Heavens, my ass, how are you so happy when you are going for isolated training? A sinister smirk slowly crept onto his face. Oh, also, I am going to stop by the windless valley every night. I will observe you guys one by one. He leaned in close, his intimidating gaze sweeping over the kneeling disciples. Let us see. As he paced, the disciples whispered excitedly amongst themselves, hoping to be chosen first. He stopped and pointed directly at Jae-jun. We will start with you. Jae-jun gasped in pure shock. But the shock quickly turned into explosive joy. Jae-jun threw his fists up, screaming his thanks. The elder's smirk deepened into a wicked grin. You are thanking me? I will see you in the evening then. The others looked on with deep envy. As the elder walked away, his dark robe swishing, the disciples shouted their enthusiastic farewells. Walking alone, the Grand Elder's eyes glowed with terrifying anticipation. Looks like I will be able to stretch my body in a while, he chuckled darkly. The scenic beauty of Zhejiang Province, West Lake, was perfectly tranquil. An old man in a straw hat sat peacefully by the water, swiftly yanking his fishing rod. He stared intensely at a crumpled piece of paper, humming deep in thought. A hulking young warrior leaned over his shoulder, asking if he actually believed what was written. The old man, Hong Gwibble, the leader of the Hangzhou external branch, replied calmly that he was actually half in doubt. His son, Hong Hwasun, snatched the letter. He argued that it was absurd, stating the sword god was from 100 years ago and was already a 72-year-old man back then. Hwasun scoffed, waving the paper around, and questioned if the Mount Hua sect leader's signature even meant anything to them now. Gwibble's single visible eye narrowed sharply. He strictly told his son to mind his words. Hwasun flinched under the scolding, instantly bowing his head and apologizing. With a smooth flick of his wrist, Gwibble cast his line back into the lake, breaking the water's surface with a gentle plop. Hwasun urged his father not to worry about something so trivial, insisting they just needed to ignore the summons. Gwibble poured water back into the lake, releasing a small fish. He confessed that he was bothered by the mention of the sword god along with the sect leader's signature. As the golden fish splashed freely, Hwasun dismissed the thought, claiming it was just nonsense that did not make any sense. Hwasun clenched his fist, a paranoid sweat breaking out on his face. He asked if Mount Hua sect summoned them because they knew their secret. Gwibble stretched his arms, noting that Mount Hua likely didn't have the means to know that. Adjusting his hat, Gwibble sighed. He guessed the same letter had been sent to the other external disciples, meaning they would have to make the trip there. Hwasun threw a tantrum, shouting that it was a crucial time for the Azure troop and they could not leave. Gwibble's expression darkened. He reminded his son that as an external disciple, it was not that simple to just refuse the main sect's summons. Hwasun crouched down nervously as Gwibble scolded him for speaking too loudly, reminding him of his official title as the One Heart Martial Academy Master. Hwasun quickly apologized for speaking out of turn. Gwibble tightly gripped the fabric of his robes. His eyes glowed with an eerie green light beneath his straw hat. He firmly stated that no one must find out his hidden identity as the Black Panther, ruler of the Hangzhou night streets. He fell silent, stroking his beard in deep thought while Hwasun stared at him in confusion. Then the old man casually dropped a bomb, suggesting that Hwasun go instead. Hwasun's jaw dropped in shock. Gwibble gathered his fishing gear. He ordered his son to go to Manhwa sect in his stead, telling him to control his temper, do what was needed, and return safely. Hwasun looked completely devastated, screaming for his father. Gwibble smoothly reasoned that Hwasun should think of it as taking a break and showing his face to the main sect. Hwasun waved his arms frantically, protesting that he did not want to go. Gwibble dryly brought up Hwasun's bloody reputation in their secret troop. A dark, ominous aura leaked from the old man as he ordered his son to control his temper. Gwibble's glowing eye pierced through the darkness. He warned Hwasun that at Manhwa sect he was not the Blood Panther but simply a martial academy successor, and he needed to show an innocent side. Hwasun gritted his teeth so hard they nearly cracked, completely silent in his sheer frustration. The peaceful lake rippled gently as Gwibble laughed heartily, teasing his son about making some new friends. Meanwhile, a massive crowd of external disciples trudged up the mountain path to the Manhwa sect gates, murmuring loudly. The grand courtyard was absolutely packed, with chattering martial artists from all over the province. Several esteemed elders stood at the top of the stairs, observing the vast sea of disciples. The disciples squished together, groaning and complaining about the pushing and shoving. One of the elders looked down with sparkling eyes, exclaiming how long it had been. A burly elder laughed warmly, noting that seeing so many people turn up made it feel like he was looking at the old Manhwa sect again. Suddenly, a disciple pointed to the stage and shouted that the grand elder had arrived. The crowd erupted into chaotic whispers, questioning if he was really the legendary sword god. A man with striking black and white hair and a sharp mustache stepped forward, his mere presence demanding absolute attention. The elders immediately bowed their heads in deep, silent reverence. The grand elder cleared his throat loudly. A disciple practically teleported across the stage to shove a wooden podium in front of him. The grand elder gripped the podium, thanking everyone for making the long trip to the main sect. The audience stared in sheer awe, gulping nervously at the legendary figure. The grand elder's face grew incredibly serious as he began to explain the reason for summoning them. Tension skyrocketed. The disciples sweated profusely, wondering if this was a declaration of war or a demand for blind fealty. A tiny, unexpected smirk crept onto the grand elder's face. He suddenly struck a fabulous pose, surrounded by a bright, sparkly aura, and bluntly demanded they give him money. A sea of invisible question marks floated above the entirely dumbfounded crowd. The grand elder turned his back to them, perfectly casual, explaining that the main sect was broke, and that was the only reason they were called back. A lonely, freezing wind blew through the utterly silent courtyard. He turned back with a shameless, bright laugh, holding out a greedy hand, saying he only expected them to give according to their conscience. The crowd went absolutely berserk with shock. The elders gasped, horrified by the grand elder's shameless panhandling. The grand elder quickly justified his extortion, reminding them that they only earned a comfortable living because they were lucky enough to learn Manhwa sect's martial arts. The mob was not having it. Disciples screamed furiously that his demands were absurd and they had no reason to help. One man shrieked that he only learned the martial arts because it was his deceased father's will. The disciples began to riot, throwing their fists in the air and yelling that they were retiring and the main sect should just rot away. The sect elders stood rigidly behind the podium, groaning and sweating under the immense pressure of the angry mob. The grand elder's face was completely overshadowed by a terrifying darkness. He chuckled ominously, stating it was fine if they didn't want to give. His eyes suddenly ignited with demonic golden fire as he demanded they leave behind everything they took from Manhwa sect. The rioting crowd instantly froze, their angry shouts turning into confused whimpers. The grand elder flashed a sinister smile. He calmly declared that the moment they left without paying, they would no longer have any connection to the sect. The disciples' faces drained of color, wondering if this madman was actually serious. A fierce-looking disciple marched to the front and bellowed, asking if leaving what they took meant giving up their martial arts. The grand elder simply stared at him with cold, dead eyes. The disciple raged, screaming that destroying their accumulated energy was basically asking them to become normal, powerless people. The grand elder leaned forward, mocking him. He stated they should be thankful he wasn't destroying their energy cores, sarcastically asking if there was a better way to facilitate the fall of the sect. A man in the front row scratched his cheek nervously, sweating bullets under the heavy tension. The angry disciple huffed loudly, turning his back on the podium and calling the entire situation ridiculous. He shouted out to the hesitant crowd, trying to rile them up by calling the main sect truly pathetic. He glared over his shoulder at the smirking grand elder, announcing that he was leaving. A terrifying vein popped on the grand elder's forehead as he coldly asked who gave him permission to go. The disciple scoffed that the sect's name wasn't even worth borrowing. Suddenly, a tremendous impact hit him, making his eyes bulge in sheer shock. He was launched violently into the air like a rag doll, right over the heads of the terrified disciples. He screamed in absolute agony as invisible blades of energy shredded his clothes and skin in midair. He crashed into the stone floor with a heavy thud, blood pooling beneath him. The crowd panicked, while another disciple stuttered in pure terror, asking how this could happen. The Grand Elder lazily pointed a single finger at the broken man bleeding on the ground, reminding everyone that he had warned them. The Grand Elder's aura exploded with a terrifying, suffocating pressure. His eyes glowed like a true demon as he repeated his final, undeniable order to leave what they took behind. From high above, an enormous crowd of disciples formed a perfect, suffocating circle around a single, utterly defeated man sprawled on the ground. Sweating profusely, one of the onlookers swallowed hard, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a blade. Standing before the massive crowd at the podium, the dark-haired young man glared down. He declared, "I told you, didn't I? If you're going to go, then leave what you've taken behind." The crowd erupted into terrified murmurs, gaping at the unconscious man. One whispered, "Did the Heavenly Will Thunder Hall leader's martial arts just get destroyed?" Another gasped, "He's strong enough to do that over 10 yards. Is that really possible?" The young man's voice roared over the whispering, "Manhwa Sect's 17th clause." His golden eyes narrowed with absolute ferocity. He demanded, "Do you know what that means?" With a heavy thud, he stepped forward, his boots striking the ground. He proclaimed, "Manhwa Sect is a Taoist sect. It's a lonely place where we must cut off ties with the outside world and train for life." The older elders of the sect clamped their hands together, their eyes sparkling with unshed tears. One whispered, choking back a sob of pure awe, "Grand Elder." The young man jabbed an accusatory finger at the crowd. "Do you guys know what state Manhwa Sect is in now? We spend the whole day going to farms to look for herbs and plants to sell because we don't know how to earn money." He continued, his tone turning bitter. "We don't have decent meals either." The elders bowed their heads in quiet shame. "We'd grab onto our starved stomachs while meditating under the lamps," he shouted, gesturing wildly, "and use the stone lanterns to practice martial arts. This is the main sect that has taught you guys." His voice boomed, echoing across the courtyard. Pumping his fists with a sharp movement, he bellowed, "Lift your heads." He clenched his fist tightly, the fabric of his sleeve crinkling. "Why are your heads bowing lower? Did you do anything wrong? Leave the lowering of heads and speechlessness to someone else." His expression grew downright demonic. "It's because we need help with daily necessities like food, clothes, and a place to stay. Earning money is the reason why we've accepted external disciples. Naive and innocent Taoists aren't able to simply ask for money," he explained, pacing before them. "Which is why it's stated in the sect laws for external disciples to never forget the kindness shown, to look after the sect and support it." The elders gasped as realization hit them, exclaiming that he was absolutely right. The external disciples flinched as he targeted them again. "You earn money and feed yourselves using Manhwa Sect's martial arts, yet you don't want to give even a little back. You shameless and unembarrassed bastards. How dare you abandon the hand that fed you just because we're poor? You should feel ashamed." "Disgraceful bunch," he scolded the sweaty, cowering men. "Have you been so tainted by the world that you no longer know all of what I've said?" Elder Bong smiled blissfully, clearly not reading the room. He chuckled. "What he said really hits the spot. Ahaha, yeah." The young man slowly turned his head, his face a mask of utter annoyance. "Bong," he muttered dryly. "Bong," he screamed, his patience snapping. "Hey." Elder Bong flinched, pointing a trembling finger at his own chest. He stuttered, "Are you talking to me? Who else is named Bong other than you?" "Tusk," the young man scoffed in disbelief. Elder Bong immediately scrambled forward with quick shuffling steps. "Ha, yes, Grand Elder." Pointing towards the nearby building, the young man ordered, "Go prepare paper and brush in the pavilion." Elder Bong blinked in confusion, asking for a pardon. The young man sighed heavily. Tusk, you're in charge of the finances, and yet you remain so clueless. You need to write down the names of those who give money so we can send them back, don't we?" Elder Bong clapped his hands together, his face lighting up with greed. "Aha, I'll do just that, Grand Elder." Turning his attention back to the massive crowd, the young man barked his final command, "Line up." Slapping a hand to his forehead in dramatic exhaustion, he yelled, "Don't you want to go back home quickly? Just give us the money and go back quickly." With heavy, imposing footsteps, he turned and began to walk away. "Give the money one at a time so it won't be messy," he tossed over his shoulder. "The disciples that are protecting the sect will close the gates at 5 p.m., he threatened. "When that happens, whoever's still here will just sleep on the sect grounds. If you dare to run away, you'll die." Instant chaos erupted. The external disciples trampled over each other with loud, frantic thuds, screaming and fighting to be the first in line. Meanwhile, miles away, the quiet estate of the Southern Blade Troop stood tall under the bright blue sky. Inside, a voice muttered, "I can't understand what the Manhwa sect is trying to do." Two men sat across from each other. One remarked that they used to be one of the original 6 great sects and shouldn't be underestimated. The other chuckled dismissively, saying that was all in the past and they had fallen far. Saimagoon, the strategist, narrowed his eyes thoughtfully. Even so, the sword god's existence is something we have to pay attention to. Yangjung, the second in command, crossed his massive arms. Honestly, I don't know whether I should believe it or not. Saimagoon replied, but they don't have any reasons to lie, do they? Because if they do, the external disciples might turn their backs on them and simply mock them. Yangjung nodded in agreement. Steam rose from their teacups as Saimagoon explained his first suggestion was to not rush into things and just let Manhwa sect take the lead, since not even the Northern Sword Association paid attention to them anymore. He took a sip of his tea. There might be benefits for the Southern Blade Troop to embrace the Manhwa sect. They could become the bridge for us between our border and the other side, north of the Yangtze River. Saimagoon's expression darkened. The second solution would be to simply get rid of the sprout completely. Yangjung raised an eyebrow, surprised by the radical thought. Saimagoon tapped his finger against the wooden table with soft, rhythmic clicks. But if we mess with Manhwa sect, wouldn't the cunning Northern Sword Association bastards use that as a pretext to come at us? Saimagoon smiled, a devious glint in his eye. We don't need to do it ourselves. What if it was the Northern Sword Association that struck Manhwa sect instead of us? We could just enjoy seeing Manhwa fall, and the association would take the damage. Yangjung burst into laughter, demanding to know the exact plan. Saimagoon replied simply, we just need to use both plans. Yangjung looked utterly bewildered, wondering how they could proceed with two conflicting plans at the same time. A sinister smirk spread across Saimagoon's face. It'll work. We can do it if we have the help of the vice troop leader. Back at the Manhwa sect, the grand courtyards were bustling under the midday sun. A massive, winding line of external disciples waited impatiently in the courtyard. A young Taoist ran past the crowd, waving his hands. The consultation will begin soon, so please prepare the money in advance, because there are a lot of people, each is only given 15 minutes. Anxious murmurs rippled through the queue as disciples wondered how much money they should give. One disciple panicked, whispering harshly to his companion, "Damn it, what are we supposed to do? How much do they want from us exactly?" His friend hushed him. The two men glanced nervously at the front of the long line. The calmer one smirked, nudging his panicking friend. "What, did your balls shrink?" The two locked eyes, a fierce, silent challenge passing between them. A bystander whispered in awe, "They must be the brothers from the Snow Plum Mountain Manor, that famous clan in Shanxi." The elder brother clicked his tongue in annoyance. "I'm telling you this right now, I've got no intentions of staying here. Let's just give roughly what they'd want and get out." He stretched his arms high above his head with a groan. "If a few pennies isn't enough, just give them a big one. It'll probably be good enough if we wrote a promissory note to them." The younger brother shook his head in disagreement. "Do you think it'll just end with them asking once? Humans will keep asking for more once they've asked for it before." He leaned in close, whispering his scheme. "If we write a promissory note, we'll have to give the money for sure. However, if we give them an agreement saying we'll give it to them, it'll be a different story." "That agreement can't get them any money," the younger brother continued. "We'll send them an amount that represents our deepest sincerity. By mail, that's how we'll write the agreement." The elder brother grinned widely, bumping shoulders with him. "Haha, that's a good idea, right?" The two brothers confidently presented their plan to the dark-haired young man, but he simply crossed his arms and demanded, "Leave one of you behind." The younger brother's smugness vanished instantly. He stammered, "Grand Elder, the agreement." The young man threw his hands up, shouting in pure frustration. "So, just get one of you to stay here until the other one brings the money? Arg." Slapping a hand to his chest, the younger brother pleaded, "Grand Elder, this is a document that's promised under the name of our clan. The Snow Plum Mountain Manor is a famous clan in Shanxi." The young man stared him down, his expression completely deadpan. "How can I trust that completely? Seriously." A dark, terrifying shadow fell over the young man's face as he let out a wicked laugh. "We're not familiar enough with each other for me to trust that piece of paper, are we?" One of the young disciples stuttered in pure panic. "That is." A wicked smirk crept across the sword god's face. He thought, "Look at these cute little monkeys flustered. Let us see you dance and entertain me in the palm of my hands. Decide now who will stay," he roared, making the two disciples flinch violently. The disciple with the red robe grabbed his companion by the collar and snapped, I have got the grave responsibility of becoming the patriarch and leading the clan. If you are the next patriarch, you should act like one and lead by example." The sword god clutched his head in annoyance. "Ah, you guys are so noisy. Both of you will stay." With a heavy crash of lightning, the two disciples froze as if their souls had left their bodies. Waving them away dismissively with a heavy sigh, the sword god yelled, "All right, next." One of the disciples stuttered in desperation, "Wait a minute, sword god." The red-robed disciple smirked, turning a blind eye to his panicked friend. Humph, look at him panicking. There is no way I will stay here by myself, Grand Elder. He grabbed his companion and dragged him away, declaring, "Come on, we will obey your orders, Grand Elder." His friend struggled, yelling, "What are you talking about? Let me go right now." Ignoring the commotion, the sword god bellowed once more, "All right, next." Heavy footsteps echoed steadily as the next person approached. A scarred, muscular man with a ponytail stepped forward, looking entirely unimpressed. An elder sitting nearby whispered his introduction. He is from Hangzhou's One Heart Martial Academy. They have been external disciples of Manhwa sect for 3 generations. The scarred man bowed respectfully, thinking to himself, "Let us keep calm. I will give him the money quietly and go back." He spoke clearly, "I pay my respects to the sword god." The sword god looked at him skeptically. He thought, "Martial Academy? Based on his scars, he is totally on the dark side of things, though." Out loud, he asked, I see. Are the things at the Martial Academy all right?" The scarred man replied calmly, "Yes, because my father is a local in Hangzhou and is popular there, we have not had any issues." The sword god crossed his arms with an intrigued hum. "So, how much are you going to give?" With a smooth motion, the man slid a white envelope across the table. The elder discreetly peeked into the envelope, curiosity getting the better of him. His eyes bulged out in shock. He stuttered, "What? 200 silver nyongs." The man bowed deeply again. "My father reproached himself for not being able to come personally because he is sick in bed, although it is not much because we did not have much time to prepare." The elder's face lit up with sparkling joy as he imagined the immense wealth. The sword god narrowed his eyes suspiciously. He thought, "Look at this guy. A mere martial academy is giving as much as 200 silver nyongs." Turning away, the muscular man said, "I will take my leave then." "Stop right there," the sword god commanded sharply. The man froze, sweating nervously as the sword god ordered, "You stay behind." Looking over his shoulder with a terrified expression, the man asked, "Grand Elder, did I do something wrong?" The sword god picked his nose lazily. "No reason." The man yelled in sheer disbelief, "Grand Elder." Flicking his finger nonchalantly, the sword god explained, "It is no fun if you give money without hesitation, and it does not feel right since you said all the right things." The scarred man stood his ground, a mix of confusion and rising anger on his face. "What do you mean?" The sword god completely ignored him, shouting past him, "Next." Meanwhile, in another room, a heavily bandaged hall leader groaned in bed, clutching his chest in pain. Suddenly, he jolted upright with a loud gasp of pure terror. Panting heavily, he tried to catch his breath as a disciple asked, "Are you awake?" The disciple sat calmly on the floor and reassured him, "Although you did suffer some internal injuries, you do not need to worry since it is not serious." The hall leader sighed with relief, clutching his stomach. Then realization struck him like a brick. "This is no time for me to be here," he yelled, scrambling out of bed. The disciple looked confused. "What is wrong? Are you going to pick a fight with the Grand Elder?" The hall leader gritted his teeth, a fierce determination flashing in his eyes. He visualized the horrific image of the Grand Elder practically radiating demonic energy. The memory alone made him shudder as he recalled the chilling words, "This time round, it will not end with you just fainting." The hall leader gnashed his teeth and said fiercely, "Do you think I will be scared because of that?" He aggressively kicked the door open with a loud bang and stormed out, thinking, "Grand Elder's temper is really nasty. I guess he has not seen what it can be like yet." Outside, his disciples rushed over in a panic, yelling, "Hall leader, are you all right?" He glared down at them as they dropped to their knees, begging for forgiveness. "What the hell are you guys standing around here for? You pathetic fools," he shouted. Before they could explain, he barked, "Shut up." He leaped forward, rushing past them. The disciples shouted, "Hall leader, where are you heading to? We will get the rest of the disciples." Suddenly, one of his men stepped in his path, holding out his hands. "Stop right there. Hall leader, you cannot." "Get lost," the hall leader barked, smacking the poor disciple away with a heavy strike. He arrived at the main hall, violently kicking the wooden doors wide open. The sword god sat inside, rubbing his temple with deep annoyance. "You again." The hall leader marched in, surrounded by a dark, oppressive aura radiating sheer fury. In an instant, the sword god unleashed his own terrifying, fiery aura. The room seemed to burn as his voice boomed, "Lower your head." With a heavy thud, the hall leader's knees slammed onto the floor against his will, groaning in defeat. Trembling violently with his head pressed to the floor, the hall leader panicked internally. "He is not someone I can take on. He is the real deal." The sword god glared down at him with glowing eyes. "Have you not learned your lesson yet? Do you want to cough up blood?" Flattening himself completely, the terrified hall leader cried out, "I am sorry, Grand Elder." The sword god sighed, closing his eyes. "It is good you know you are wrong." Sweating profusely, the hall leader looked up with a sliver of hope and asked, "In that case, will you forgive me?" The sword god stretched his arms lazily and declared, "You stay behind too." The hall leader's face contorted into utter disbelief as sweat trickled down his cheek. "Pardon." Resting his chin on his hand, the sword god said, "You have been marked by me. You are forbidden from leaving this place until I say it is okay. The hall leader looked completely shattered, as if his soul was forcibly extracted from his body. Suddenly, a soft sliding sound filled the room as a delicate figure stepped inside. It was a woman in elegant white robes, wearing a wide bamboo hat with a veil that obscured her face. Frosty energy trailed off her every step. The hall leader stared in awe, thinking, that person is the sword god, Octolotus Sect's next sect leader, Beek Soryung. The sword god yawned loudly, utterly unbothered. He thought, what does she want from us? What has Manhwa sect ever done for the Lotus 8 sect? Ignoring her entirely, the sword god shouted, next! The woman stood completely still, unfazed. As she stepped closer, she thought with icy determination, I will tell him to his face. The Octolotus sect will sever its relationship with Manhwa sect. The sword god's eyes widened in sudden surprise. He looked at her, taken aback by the intense aura she emitted. He thought, gosh, what a stare. Why does her gaze feel so cold? A confident grin spread across his face. He thought, she is a proud one, huh? With piercing pink eyes visible through her veil, she began, we the Octolotus sect. Before she could finish, the sword god interrupted her casually. You stay behind as well. Her eyes flared with immediate anger. We the Octolotus, she tried again, her patience snapping. The sword god shrugged dismissively, dark energy swirling behind him. If you defy me, your martial arts will be destroyed immediately. The veiled woman trembled with barely contained rage, her fists clenched tight at her sides. Ignoring her murderous glare, the sword god threw his hand up and yelled, next. The Grand Elder casually pushed the doors open, a relaxed smile on his face. He asked, have you guys eaten? The disciples sat frozen around the long wooden table. The Grand Elder's imposing shadow stretched across the floor, filling the room with a suffocating tension. The disciple swallowed hard, eyes wide with panic as a cold sweat rolled down his cheek. He thought, bastards, don't trigger the Grand Elder. The muscular disciples exchanged nervous, glaring looks. They whispered frantically, wondering why the others were pathetic bastards unable to read the room. Breaking the heavy silence, a female disciple smiled brightly, completely oblivious. She flirted playfully. Hey, Grand Elder, the other external disciples have left already. Why aren't you sending me home? The Grand Elder glanced back at the stiff, anxious men behind her. He replied calmly, are you bored? I kept those two here just in case of that. She grabbed his sleeve, laying on the cute charm. You kept them behind because you're going to teach them, right? But I'm very talentless. Watching her giggle, a fellow disciple sneered internally, a drop of sweat sliding down his face. He thought, teaching my ass? They simply got marked by him. His gaze shifted to another female disciple, standing as still as a statue while a freezing aura radiated from her. He shivered, thinking, this lady here is a total block of ice. It's chilly and freezing around her. A burly, scarred disciple crossed his arms with a menacing scowl. He muttered a gruff, what? The observing disciple gulped loudly, totally intimidated. He thought, let's not get close to him. The first girl doubled down on her cute act, begging the elder with puppy dog eyes. The observer mused, she's a total fox based on how she acts. I heard she's the daughter of the top 3 richest clans, the Treasure Flower Finance Manor. Hugging his arm tightly, she smiled. Grand Elder, didn't I show you just how sincere I am with the money already? The Grand Elder stroked his beard with a satisfied nod. Yeah, you did. You definitely did. 100 gold nyongs. There's no way I'd forget that. Confident she had won him over, she offered to send 300 more gold nyongs once she got back, begging to leave. The other disciples listened in pure shock, minds blown by the insanely large sum. Her smug facade shattered like glass as the Grand Elder bluntly commanded, stay behind. The cute act vanished in an instant. Face flushed with pure rage, she screamed, why? The Grand Elder chuckled, eyes gleaming with sheer amusement. I like you. You'll entertain me until I allow you to leave. Furious, she erupted, waving her fists. Entertain? You sickening old geezer, I'm going to leave, I'm leaving. Spinning on her heel, she stormed off toward the door with an angry, defiant stomp. But before she could reach the exit, the Grand Elder casually reached his hand out toward her retreating back. An invisible force violently yanked her backward through the air. She shrieked, ah! With a heavy thud, she hit the floor face first, sliding across the stone tiles. Tears pricked her eyes as she squeezed them shut in pain, groaning a pathetic, ah. She trembled weakly on the ground, whimpering in pain as the Grand Elder's boots stepped casually toward her defeated form. He let out a low chuckle, deeply entertained. Well, being young also means being immature and brash. That's the fun of youth, isn't it, you little rascal? A disciple watched in absolute horror, his face pale. He thought, he was just saying that he'd destroy the martial arts of anyone who leaves without his permission. And now he's smiling while saying he likes her. Outside, the sect's quiet courtyard sat peacefully beneath a clouded mountain sky. The nervous disciples stood shoulder to shoulder in the open yard, autumn leaves blowing past them in the tense breeze. With a soft tap, a hand picked up a small stone from the dirt. The Grand Elder tossed the rock into the air, a mischievous look in his eyes, before catching it with a sharp snap. With a quick flick of his wrist, he tossed it effortlessly toward one of the disciples. The disciple fumbled slightly but caught the stone with a soft smack. He looked up confused and asked, "Oh." Pointing sharply toward the distant horizon, the Grand Elder ordered, "Throw it." The disciple stared back blankly, sweat forming on his brow as total confusion took over. Losing his patience, the Grand Elder roared angrily, "Not like that. Raise your hands high as possible, then throw them towards the sky in the north." The disciple gripped the stone, gritting his teeth in frustration. He thought, why is he asking me to throw it and lift my hands up high out of nowhere? Say all of that from the start. Putting his entire body into the motion, the disciple hurled the stone straight up into the sky with a loud shout, "Haya!" The rock soared upward with a sharp whistle. The Grand Elder watched it fly and simply said, "Now look." In a sudden blur of motion, the Grand Elder launched himself forward. The disciple's jaw dropped as the old man dashed at impossible speeds. A dark silhouette rocketed high into the bright sky, effortlessly chasing after the falling rock. With a soft sliding sound, the Grand Elder zipped right past the stunned disciple. Another disciple watched the spectacle with bulging eyes, gasping in disbelief. He thought, corporeal shift. The Grand Elder landed smoothly, casually catching the falling stone right out of the air. The disciple stared at him, absolutely flabbergasted. He stuttered nervously, asking if he hadn't just thrown that very stone. With a terrifying crunch, the Grand Elder pulverized the stone in his grip. The dust fell from his fingers as he said, "You saw that, right? If you're faster than me, give it a try. Let's not make this tiresome. The world is about helping one another and living in peace." The disciple looked as if his soul had left his body. He thought frantically, how is this situation living in peace? Grand Elder, I think you're the one who needs to apply that. Night fell over the Manhwa sect, bathing the grand architecture in a peaceful, serene blue glow. Inside a warmly lit hall, the sect elders sat quietly around a massive, empty table. Breaking the silence, one of the white-haired elders chuckled warmly, noting it had been a while since they had all gathered like this. Another elder nodded in agreement, explaining they had simply been too busy managing the temple to meet. A quiet voice from the end of the table observed that Wang and the youngest must be busy. One of the elders laughed. Because of what the Grand Elder did, Wang is probably too busy to even sleep. But I'm not worried for him. He's always talked about money even since he was young. Isn't this a dream come true for him? An elder with a black cap sighed, crossing his arms in disapproval. Is the youngest still stuck at work? That guy, seriously? He's already this old. He should start acting his age. The white-haired elder chuckled softly, coming to his defense. So what if he's a little immature? It'll be big trouble if he does mature. That's his charm after all. The room filled with light-hearted laughter as another elder teased, asking what charm he meant, accusing him of fawning over the youngest now that he had aged. A senior elder smiled warmly, a soft blush of happiness on his cheeks. This is great. How long has it been since everyone laughed together like this? He closed his eyes, pure relief washing over his tired features. This is all thanks to the Grand Elder. The other elders murmured in passionate agreement, offering their thanks to the great work of the Grand Elder. But the senior elder's smile slowly faded, replaced by a grim frown. But this isn't a permanent solution. The reason why our worries have disappeared and people are laughing is all because of money. The room instantly grew tense. An elder gasped, asking how his senior brother could say something like that. The senior elder simply chuckled dryly. He looked at their shocked faces and asked, "What, are you guys embarrassed?" Sweating nervously, the man in the black cap argued, "Senior brother, Manhwa sect is known to be an honest and greedless Taoist sect within the Central Plains." The senior elder pierced him with a sharp, unrelenting look. Why is our sect declining and having a hard time? He pressed on, his voice full of hard truths. We don't have money and food. Isn't that why we're having a hard time? Let's be honest between ourselves. Taoists are also humans who need food to survive. Outside, a gentle breeze swept through the tranquil courtyards, the bright full moon hanging high above the quiet sect. The senior elder sighed heavily, looking completely exhausted. How could our Grand Elder, who's already old, do all of this? It's because our sect leader who did everything has fallen ill. He continued, his voice laced with deep regret. Do you guys know? When our sect leader collapsed, we didn't share in his worries. We should have split up the heavy responsibilities he took on. Clenching his fist over his chest, he lowered his head in shame. I only realize it now at 72 years old. He confessed his guilt, stating he wasn't living a content life, but rather a negligent one, far from honest and greedless. The heavy truth sank in. He realized he was simply a person who made a mistake by doing nothing and neglecting his responsibilities. Staring sadly at the floor, another elder spoke up softly, telling his senior brother that it wasn't entirely his fault. But the senior elder raised his head, eyes burning with sudden, fierce resolve. Manhwa sect must change. No, we must realize the mistakes of our past and make sure we don't repeat them as we revert to our past glory. The other elders sat up straighter, their spirits ignited. They agreed loudly, declaring they needed to put their heads together and not just stand by after everything the Grand Elder had done for them. Clenching their fists with newfound determination, they shouted in unison, "From now on, Manhwa sect is going to change. We're going to change." High above the meeting hall, the Grand Elder sat casually on the tiled roof, staring out at the endless starry sky. A soft, genuine smile crossed his face. He mumbled to himself, "Gosh, how are those old Taoists so kind? They're just like kids." He gazed up at the massive, glowing moon, admitting softly, "Orthodox bastards are indeed kind." Scratching his ear with a soft sigh, he realized he never thought he would be the one praising Orthodox bastards. Looking out over the quiet beauty of the Manhwa sect, he concluded gently, "I guess life is always full of unexpected things." Carrying a massive sack under the starry night sky, Jang Pyong trudged up the mountain path, panting heavily with every step. His eyes red with exhaustion, he complained. They should have just done their isolation training in a nearby cave. Why did they have to train that far away in the windless valley, that darn Grand Elder? Suddenly he gasped, slapping a hand over his mouth in sheer panic. He whipped his head around, scanning the dark woods. "He's not anywhere near here, is he? I'm so scared he'll just suddenly appear." Reaching a towering stone etched with the words Windless Valley, he let out a long breath. "I'm finally here." His booming voice echoed through the dark, jagged gorge. "I'm here." Deep in the woods, an elder shot up from the ground, trembling wildly. "What? Jang Pyong is already here." Another elder glanced back, pure terror in his eyes. He stammered to ask whose turn it was today. Bursting from a bush in a panic, one man screamed, "Grand Elder, it's not my turn today." A shrill cry pierced the dense foliage. He begged the elder to kill him, quickly changing his mind to plead for his life. The canopy rustled violently as another agonizing scream for the Grand Elder tore through the night. A mustached elder standing nearby smiled nervously, a bead of sweat sliding down his cheek. "I guess everyone will be working hard again," he chuckled. Jang Pyong stumbled into their clearing, gasping heavily for air. "Has everyone been doing all right?" The mustached elder placed a hand on his chest, exhaling a deep breath. "Why did you shout? You startled me." Another elder approached with open arms and a warm smile. "You're here? Long time no see." Jang Pyong immediately bowed his head in respect. "Master Uncle." The elder waved his hands dismissively. "Since it's just us, call me senior brother." Jang Pyong looked utterly bewildered. "But I'm just a second-class disciple. How could I do that?" The master uncle stared at him with a deadpan expression, sweat dripping down his temple as he muttered the boy's name. Dropping his heavy sack to the ground with a soft thud, Jang Pyong thought to himself, how could he say that so nonchalantly when he used to be so playful? The stern-faced elder crossed his arms. "Why did you bring so many things in the middle of the night?" Jang Pyong smiled brightly. "Master Uncle Ban, Grand Elder asked me to bring clothes, rice balls, and some other stuff for everyone." Ban's head whipped around frantically, scanning the dark forest. "He didn't come along with you." A voice echoed from the shadows. "He probably doesn't have the time to come here." Ban looked confused, asking what he meant. Jang Pyong waved his hands, laughing nervously. "It's because." All that happened, Jang Pyong recounted the massive brawl and the chaotic events back at the sect. The three elders froze, their jaws dropping wide open in utter disbelief. Ban clapped his hands together, an admiring grin spreading across his face, as expected of the Grand Elder. The moon hung high in the tranquil, cloud-swept sky. Jang Pyong scratched his cheek, offering a polite smile. "I'll be taking my leave now then." "All right, thanks for coming here," one replied. Ban added with a chuckle, "Be careful on your way back, don't fall down." Jang Pyong grimaced in annoyance. "Come on, I'm not a kid, seriously." As the boy hurried back down the path, the two elders waved him off playfully. "Look at where you're going," Ban laughed. Once he was gone, Ban sighed heavily. "What can we do? Sect laws have the ultimate say, and this is what the sect leader and elders have decided." His companion rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "What if we secretly tell Grand Elder about this?" The other two recoiled in shock, shouting to ask if he seriously wanted to tell the Grand Elder. Staring into the quiet woods, the elder reasoned, "Since he is reforming Manhwa sect, maybe he'll convince the elders." Ban snapped at him angrily. "Don't do anything stupid. Don't you know that the act insinuates the elders' decisions are wrong? It disrespects their hierarchy and authority." Looking up at the bright moon, Ban's expression softened into deep melancholy. If only Grand Elder was there back then. He thought to himself, if our sect was like that back then, Master Uncle Kai wouldn't have dreamt of something like that. Master Uncle Kai's disciple, Pyong, would never have to go through that unfortunate day. Suddenly, a chilling voice oozed from the darkness. "Seeing as how you guys are all lined up, you guys must have been waiting a long time for me." Ban froze, the color draining from his face. The Grand Elder dropped from the sky like a phantom, landing silently right behind them. The elders scrambled back in panic, stumbling over their words as they stuttered the Grand Elder's title. Trembling violently, Ban stuttered to ask why he was here. The Grand Elder simply stood there, an intimidating aura radiating from him. The Grand Elder crossed his arms, his eyes sharp. What do you mean? I haven't seen you guys today, have I? Waving his hands in a frantic panic, Ban stuttered that wasn't what he meant, explaining that Jang Pyong had told them he wouldn't be coming today. The Grand Elder's brow twitched. What, did he say that? But what does my coming here have to do with the brat? Ban forced out a painfully awkward laugh, nervously rubbing the back of his head. The Grand Elder's golden eyes flared with menace. Never mind that. Whose turn is it today? All three men turned completely blue, frozen stiff in sheer terror. A sinister chuckle echoed through the mountains. I wonder who will be good. Agonizing screams filled the air, lasting all through the night until the golden sun finally crested the mountain peaks. Morning arrived. The three elders sat battered and utterly defeated around a blazing campfire. One of them sighed, staring blankly into the flames. We let our guard down because of that stupid Jang Pyong. Another clutched his chest, letting out a relieved breath. But isn't it fortunate that it wasn't us? Huddled tightly for warmth, the third muttered, Pyong will probably go crazy when he sees Pyong next time. Suddenly, another distant, horrifying shriek for the Grand Elder tore through the serene morning woods. Ben trembled, his eyes wide with anxiety. I can't sleep when it's approaching my turn. The elder beside him shook his head in solemn agreement. You're better than me. Stoking the fire with a stick, he confessed. I only feel at ease after I get beaten up by Grand Elder overnight. The crackling flames seemed to dance with the agonizing memories of getting mercilessly pummeled. A heavy, collective sigh escaped the three men as they slumped around the pit. Ban glanced sideways. Senior brother, hasn't it gotten bearable when we use the wooden sword these days? The other nodded in agreement. Ripping a handful of grass from the dirt, he groaned. I thought it'd be easy when I saw him holding a cane or a wooden club. He tapped his fingers on his knee, but the wooden sword isn't that bad. He trailed off, rubbing his chin as a serious thought crossed his mind. But Ban tilted his head, a deeply puzzled expression on his face. No matter what I think about it, it feels a little strange. The other elder raised an eyebrow. What's strange? As dry leaves fluttered to the ground, Ban mused. There really is nothing we can do against Grand Elder's cane and wooden club. But when he uses the wooden sword and plum blossom sword technique, Ban continued, there are actually times he leaves some openings. Memories flashed of the Grand Elder's terrifying, shadowy visage striking down with the wooden sword amidst screams of pain. Ban shivered, wrapping his arms around himself. In any case, this is just what I think. The other elder's eyes bulged as a shocking realization hit him. Could it be that the Grand Elder doesn't know how to use the plum blossom sword technique? A gentle breeze swept across the majestic, cloud-kissed peaks of the mountain range. Deep in the forest, three disciples huddled around a crackling campfire, their faces illuminated by the warm, dancing flames. One of the men smirked, crossing his arms. He confidently reasoned, I'm certain the Grand Elder was just going easy on us. He's lowering his level to match ours, another chimed in, because we're definitely lacking in it. The third disciple jolted back in sheer panic, his eyes wide as he shouted, going easy on us? He definitely isn't someone who knows how to do that. Suddenly, heavy footsteps approached from behind, making the two seated disciples flinch in terror. A stern voice echoed, Goodness, I know what you guys are all thinking about. The newcomer clicked his tongue in profound disappointment. Don't you know that Grand Elder's nickname is Sword God? Do you think someone with that title wouldn't know the plum blossom sword technique? That's absurd. The panicking disciple scratched the back of his neck, sweating profusely. He let out a nervous laugh and awkwardly agreed, right. Elsewhere, an old man with a long white beard rested peacefully in his bed, letting out a soft, drowsy hum. Suddenly, a loud voice shattered the tranquility. Sect leader, you're awake, a mustached disciple shouted, startling the old man. The disciple leaned in, lightly tapping the drowsy sect leader's shoulder. A lot has happened within the sect while you were asleep. Chuckling to himself with a devious grin, the disciple added, Given your expression, I guess those weren't bad events. The sect leader sat up, rubbing his tired eyes while the disciple dramatically waved his arms around the room, recounting the recent events. The disciple clasped his hands together, his face flushed with uncontainable excitement. What do you think? Isn't our dear Grand Elder really incredible? The sect leader sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. Brat, since when were you close enough to the Grand Elder to call him your dear Grand Elder? The disciple gasped dramatically, clutching his chest as if mortally wounded. How can you say that? Our dear Grand Elder is Mount Hua Sect's unprecedentedly great hero. We're basically one big family. Shaking his head, the sect leader grumbled, You're really becoming more glib-tongued as you age. You would have already become the most senior amongst your peers if you had put that energy into training. Tusk. The disciple pouted playfully. Sect leader, we've been taught that obsessing over training isn't the right path. We need to go with the flow, just like the clouds in the sky. The old man scoffed, a look of pure, unadulterated disbelief on his face. Gosh, when did you start following this sort of thing? The mustached disciple merely laughed sheepishly, rubbing his hands together with a sly grin. Noticing the sect leader preparing to leave, the disciple asked, "Don't you need to get going to Windless Valley? Aren't your peers doing isolated training there?" The disciple flinched in genuine shock as a terrible realization hit him. He stuttered, asking how the leader knew about that since he didn't remember mentioning it. The sect leader glared at him with an unyielding gaze. "You should go to Windless Valley as well. You mustn't slack off in your training," the old man commanded firmly, making the disciple sweat nervously. The disciple waved his hands frantically in protest. "Wait, sect leader, what you said really saddens me. Don't you know how long I've been taking care of you?" The sect leader was completely unamused. "Taking care of me isn't important. No one will train on your behalf. How long will you waste your time like this?" Puffing out his chest with sheer, unfounded pride, the disciple beamed. "Until you recover your energy at least." The old man erupted in anger. "Tusk, does it take an order from me for you to take action? Must I talk to the Grand Elder personally about this before you get a grip?" The disciple merely hummed a cheerful tune and smugly replied, "He has already excused me from the isolated training." The sect leader froze, utterly flabbergasted by the sheer audacity. "What?" Laughing heartily, the disciple explained. "When I told him that no one's better at taking care of you than I am, he replied, 'You can be excused then.'" Still highly skeptical, the sect leader narrowed his eyes. "However, if you slack off in your training." The disciple thumped his chest, overflowing with confidence. "Don't worry, Grand Elder promised me that so long as I take good care of you, he'll teach me the advanced mystic art." The sect leader's jaw dropped in sheer disbelief. Advanced mystic art from the Grand Elder himself. The disciple clenched his fist in ultimate triumph. "I just need to take care of you, then he'll definitely teach me the strongest mystic art of Manhwa sect." His boisterous laughter echoed all the way to the heavens, disturbing the peaceful chirping birds above. Meanwhile, at a secluded valley, a massive waterfall crashed violently down the jagged mountain stones. The deafening roar of the heavy water filled the air, sending thick, cool mists everywhere. A solitary figure meditated amidst the roaring current. He thought to himself about how perfectly the sky, land, and nature blended together in a single view. Bright sunlight refracted beautifully through the scattered droplets of water floating magically in the air. A tall, fiercely muscular man with long, dark hair stepped out from the raging waters, a dominant presence. Sitting cross-legged beneath a pounding waterfall, he reflected inward, satisfied that he had mastered the 18 energy arts and that his plum blossom sword technique was on track. Steam hissed from his heated body as he realized he needed to prove he was as strong as Hanho to avoid any unnecessary suspicion. Suddenly, an immense aura erupted from his core, splitting the air with blinding crimson and azure light. His eyes snapped open, blazing with fierce intensity. He thought to himself that despite the blood and pain, he had finally learned the energy arts of the Taoist Manhwa sect using the Slaughterer demon art. A confident, slightly wicked smirk spread across his rugged face. "The air burst sword now materializes when I use sword energy. What more do I need?" Running a hand through his wet hair, he pondered his next move. "All right, which sword technique should I learn next?" He visualized 3 profound manuals in his mind. Scratching his back, he muttered about how complicated the lightning storm cross burst and the limitless technique sounded. His expression twisted into absolute horror as a dreadful realization hit him. Does the limitless sword technique require endless training? Must I train for life? Tears of utter frustration streamed down his face. Sobbing over the damned Han-Ho, he decided to forget the limitless sword technique and focus on the remaining 2. He scowled in pure distaste, clicking his tongue in extreme annoyance because he despised the demon-repelling technique. Standing tall in the shallow waters, he stared intensely at several swords planted firmly in the riverbed. With a sharp exhale, he thrust his hand forward, commanding the very air around him with sheer will. A powerful magnetic pull violently yanked a sword right out of the water, sending it flying straight toward him. He snatched the hilt out of the air with a heavy, deeply satisfying thud. His muscles bulged as he twisted his body, slashing the blade downward with terrifying, untamed speed. The sheer force of his swing generated a massive cyclone, violently churning the water into a raging vortex. Yet he looked at the blade with profound disappointment. He grumbled that it felt like holding nothing and complained about its focus on flexibility. His mind drifted back to his glorious past, picturing himself wielding a colossal, blood-soaked axe. "Ah, I miss Tyrant Ruler axe and Black Lightning Labries," he lamented deeply. Shaking off the nostalgia, he gripped the sword tightly with both hands, readying a devastating stance. Dark, crackling energy surged from his arms, wrapping the pristine blade in a sinister, blood-red aura. A thunderous explosion of power blasted the water away from him, forming a massive, swirling crater in the river. He stared down the sharp edge of his blade, his eyes glowing with a deadly, piercing focus. As he completed the form, the raging waters calmed instantly, creating perfect, expanding ripples across the glassy surface. A faint smile touched his lips as he nodded in genuine approval. Not too bad." He sighed heavily, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead. "It'll take me a while to learn it, though." With a casual flick of his wrist, he tossed the sword high into the air. The sword spun wildly, engulfed in a blazing, torrential storm of pure sword energy. Pointing his index and middle fingers toward the sky, he shouted with absolute authority, "Hup!" The glowing blade completely obeyed his command, tearing through the sky with a deafening screech. He reached out his hand, ready to confidently recall the weapon as it plunged back toward the turbulent waters. Throwing both arms up in sheer, unbridled excitement, he roared at the heavens, "Things get serious." Well, that's all for today. If you like this video, then give it a big thumbs up. And yeah, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Bye.